the chairperson, hearing the executive officer at the table at the end. Please feel free to grab that extra chair. Make your way up. We have 10 minutes for this deputation as per usual. That includes questions from elected members. Yeah, thank you very much for coming. Take it away.
Thank you, and good evening, fellow elected members. I'd like to introduce you to Colin Shearing, our newly executive officer. Hand over to Colin to introduce himself.
This is Colin Shearing, executive officer of this harbour. Thank you, Deputy Mayor and elected. We discussed the paper and our position in relation and the conversation, if you like, start the conversation about. Say from the outset, we are very, very supportive of schools, and if we destination for school exhibit, and we support our South Australian secondary school leavers in providing a safe and secure site to enjoy their school celebrations. We believe, though, it should not be at the expense and disruption of Victor Harbour's local trade, including customer traffic and distribution logistics. We need an all-of-stakeholder process. We need to drive a collaborative approach. Same of you. Victor Harbour's businesses are the main engine room driving Harbour's local. We all know that, and we need to respect that. Moreland Reserve, we believe, presents a major disruption to all surrounding businesses, including closing of streets and the main tourist destination. The synergy between the school's event and the local bricks and mortar businesses does come at a cost. Albeit, there are also swings and roundabouts. So on one hand, we will have businesses that will receive benefit. On the other hand, we have those bricks and mortar businesses very close and adjacent to school's event that do suffer consequences. Note in our correspondence, and we cite the swings and roundabouts. So in that letter, we have, and for the record, we have some of that data through the FENMAP data, which I must say has been erroneous. I apologise for that, but that came from the council. So we're going on that original data, and we will address that and get that fixed. Doesn't make any difference to the outcome. And we will give you an undertaking to the additional data in the next. However, notwithstanding the data irregularities received via this, there is still a notable voice local business immediately surrounding and those that are adjacent to the current location that create non-synergy between businesses. As part of our narrative, Business Victor Harbour recommends that not only this event, all events and festivals Victor Harbour have a consistent, well-coordinated stakeholders engagement plan. BVH, Business Victor Harbour, is committed to assist in driving a key stakeholders engagement plan that is consistent with all other festivals and impacting local business. Further, BVH is committed to working closely with all stakeholders connected to schoolies and has already undertaken consultation with County Youth via Nigel Knowles, and I've spoken to him on a couple of occasions now at length about the event and about possible relocation. We are very prepared to together and to see that result. Also spoken to one of the assistant commissioners in SAPOL, Noel Bamford, and he directed me to Julie Thomas, who's the district superintendent at Mount Barker SAPOL agency, and she's quite supportive of getting into conversations with us. I've also spoken to SA Health, Dr. Chris Lees, who is Victoria's right-hand person, and he has given me Paul McGowan's details, and I've sent the information letter to him. It's the position of Business Victor Harbor that Victor Harbor School's event be relocated to a different location within Victor Harbor, and I'll stress that within Victor. Further, Business Victor Harbor is committed to work with council, all relevant stakeholders to best and balanced. This position, at the very least, is seeking that all stakeholders come to the table to discuss and explore options and or solutions, and that a key stakeholders engagement plan be developed that leads to a well-coordinated, stakeholder-driven process and outcomes. And I guess in closing is that over the last couple of weeks since I've been on board, there seems to be that mood for change, and we are very committed to that process. So unless happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Elected members, questions for Lily.
I'll try to phrase this right. Look, the data suggested, data provided suggested, and I know that you've said that new data will come, and that won't doesn't impact this move by Business Victor Harbor, but I thought it was a little bit disappointing. It does seem to suggest that this event wasn't a financially viable or undermined its financial viability or its economic impact and for the region. This, I can understand moving it and you're supporting schoolies. This suggested move, and if if the Schoolies Festival guys are on board, that's great. Is it shifting a problem from the Business Victor Harbor community? I understand that there's obviously some issues there with the greater community of Victor Harbor as far as the residential community of Victor Harbor if we do move this. That's one of my concerns about the Schoolies Festival, and it's just undermining the value of that Schoolies Festival, not just from an economic point of view, and the data has already put some in people's minds that there's a hostility towards this anyway, we know that, and it undermines the great work that this festival does for the schoolies. So now trying to gather up a thought process that says this event is still worthwhile bringing to Victor Harbor, they're behind the 8 ball again now, and I think that's damaging. I think that's a concern. It bothers me a little bit that Business Victor Harbor has come out with this. Particularly when we're now going to be throwing potentially this festival into the broader community. So they've got another challenge to get over that mark to provide a really good event that they have been doing for a long time. It's a safe event. Do you see a problem with moving this event? Is it throwing the issue and the resistance to schoolies onto a different part of our demographic, a different sector of our council region? And if so, how is Business Victor Harbor going to support us to make that happen for schoolies if that's the case? Is there a plan to front that side of things?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. It's a great question. And can I say there's no problems, there's challenges with all this to make a change. Quite candidly, it's not going to be easy because, you shift this location to another location, and what happens to the previous location with young people walking around the town, or traffic and everything else. But we just believe that the synergy between the business community and the actual event needs a lot of work. And my conversations with Nigel Knowles, the CEO of Encounter Youth, is that he's quite amenable to making these changes and working with us. So we're quite keen to work with them. Yes, there will be teething problems, and yes, there will be issues, but we can overcome them. And pardon the pun, there's many ways to skin a cat. So at the end of the day, I believe we can do it. And we've got a great board at Business Victor Harbour, who some of them, well, they're all residents as well. So I hear what you're saying. Yes, so it's going to be challenging, but we've got, if we get all the stakeholders at the table, including council, I think we've got a great opportunity, and now is the time to do it. So I'm not saying for this year, I'm saying let's make the conversation. Let's get the conversation going.
Yeah, so just wanted to add to that as well. So we're not looking at, obviously this year, the wheels in motion are already in place for this year's festival, and it would be unrealistic to actually put that pressure on the organisers and the community as well. So looking at beyond this year for next year's event with as much notice as possible. And just referring back to Councillor Lidley's point, it would be up to as well as the other stakeholders to make sure that it is not an impost or shifting a burden from one aspect of the community to the next. So I'd suggest that that would be the terms of reference as part of that discussion, which for the record, the business community has not been involved with. We're not a stakeholder. We've asked to have a seat at the table for the first time to be part of that discussion, together with council, SA Health, Encounter Youth and other stakeholders as well.
Thank you. Just on a procedural thing before we keep going, hopefully, the 10 minutes allowed for a deputation has expired. We just need a 2/3 show of hands. If you would like to continue questions, I know there's at least 4 of you that would have indicated you'd like to ask me a question. Beautiful. We'll extend it for another 10. With that, I think Councillor Kemp was the first one to catch my eye with a question.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. I just thank you, Michael, and thank you, Colin. I guess Michael answered my question at the end there, saying you don't want this event moved this year, because my question was around the issues around that. But I suppose there's a question for the management about the Warland Reserve. If the weather is too wet and it's too boggy, what will happen then? Where can we move the event to if the Warland Reserve is not suitable for this year?
Director Padhouse or Director Hayter?
I might have to take it on notice unless I noticed Mark's up the back, unless he knows what the contingency plans are for the event that he'd be able to speak into. Okay.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Kemp, satisfied?
Yeah, thank you. I think if this is coming to a situation and the conversation starts early, I think this will identify a second site in case Warland Reserve is not suitable due to the weather.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson was the next person.
Thank you. Excuse me. My question is, there are several other events that use Warland Reserve and also include road closures. Rock and Roll Festival is one that comes to mind that uses part of the bottom end of the main street and Warland Reserve. My question is, why schoolies? I wouldn't imagine that the Rock and Roll Festival attendees have much synergy with the businesses either. I've attended that and I haven't seen much synergy happening. So why schoolies?
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. Good question again. And I say that the schoolies 3 days is a lead up to it and a bump out as well. So it's got quite a probably a 3-week, 2.5-week period to consider with schoolies. With the Rock and Roll festivals and other festivals that you run here, all we're saying is that we believe that the business community needs to be at the table, and we have a very clear stakeholders engagement plan for that process. Notwithstanding that, and to answer your question, why the schoolies, we have heard from that the schoolies can be quite disruptive even at night when they're trying to do business. And that's from some of the accommodation areas that are really close to the schoolies event. So as far as the rock and roll concert is concerned, we're just saying we want consistency right across any event or festival that takes place at the business community. That's always, and just at least have a discussion point.
Councillor Mann?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I guess my question sort of stems a little bit more on, you've provided the economic data or a version around there not being that benefit for the business community, but yet you've come out very, very supportive of schoolies and the festival. So you're not saying you don't want schoolies to happen in Victor Harbor, but I guess what's the evidence or what's your justification or belief that moving it, the festival, the formal nightly festival, to anywhere else in Victor Harbor would improve the conditions for the businesses in and around the pubs, the accommodation providers, the place where the schoolies will be hanging regardless?
Thank you, Councillor. All we can say to that is that you have a screen that's put up around that particular precinct. You have Black Scrim as well, which is very close to those businesses that are adjacent to that particular precinct. It becomes a logistical nightmare to some of those because it's fairly dense in businesses, and it becomes a logistical nightmare for those distributors who want to get into those particular businesses so they can replenish their stocks and goods. That's an issue. That's a really big issue. Remember, this is the end of the school celebrations, which is brilliant, but it's also right on the edge of the festival or the festive season here in Adelaide, in South Australia, sorry, in regional. And these businesses want to get going. They want to get going with business and do the business. And we're saying that by removing where it is at the moment and to a new location, supportive by business, by the way, that it just lends itself better to the interests of the community, tourism, and all those sectors that are involved in the festive season here in the region.
Councillor Robertson?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I hear what you're saying about the schoolies. It's great to see that you're supportive of it and just looking for a different format or a different location. I would suggest that this year, that as soon as possible, if it's in the council's remit, to make sure that Business Victor Harbor does have a seat at the table. A lot of the arrangements about schoolies and that are have already been made, dates, etc. But there's an ongoing, I'm not sure of the frequency of the meetings, but there's an ongoing set of meetings that in that liaison or that management meeting between council and schoolies, and of course the other actors, SAPOL and SA Health, etc. And I think that would be really good to make sure that Business Victor Harbor is brought up totally to speed with any minutes there are of meetings that have been held, and to make sure that they're at the table. Because and on a side issue, I think it's good to make sure that these events, and not just schoolies, but schoolies is a really standout event in that it brings absolutely enormous business to Victor Harbor. I was really surprised to dive into some of that data to see how many of our hotels, motels are chock full of schoolies for the few days of the schoolies itself, but also some of the days either side, millions and millions of dollars. So those people are doing extremely well out of it. They will have changed their minds a lot, because it's only seems like a decade or so since, you know, I remember cleaning up glass all over Warland Reserve, not necessarily after schoolies, but sometimes after New Year's Eve. But
Sorry, Councillor Robertson. Do you have a question for these gentlemen?
Yeah, sorry. And that is, do you think you can use this experience this year to find a way for the business community in Victor Harbor to develop a better understanding of the schoolies and be able to work out their stakeholder engagement with the schoolies, as well as, of course, schoolies having a stakeholder engagement with them?
Thank you, Councillor. If I can just answer that very quickly, if that's right, Michael. Look, I think this is the perfect opportunity to do this in Victor Harbor. You've got now, we are now in conversations positively with Encounter Youth. Even on Friday night, late on Friday night, we were having a conversation, myself and Nigel Knowles, of the CEO of Encounter Youth, and made it very clear that we want to work together on this to get this to happen, and to have rigorous and robust discussions, and having us at the table is very important for the business community here in Victor Harbor. As I keep on saying, it drives the economy, the local economy of Victor Harbor, and we must be at the table at all times when it comes to economic development of Victor Harbor.
Awesome. Councillor Glasbrook, do I see your hand at some point there? Or you've reassessed?
No, I'm not sure if I should say what I think or not. That's the trouble.
Is it a question?
No, it's not a question.
If not,
I'll catch up with him afterwards.
we'll have the motion
Yeah.
afterwards, so beautiful. Councillor Schofield, you haven't asked a question yet. Do you have one?
The couple of questions that I had have already been answered.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
I have, I guess, one final question for you guys, and that's just in relation to your understanding moving forward with Encounter Youth, looking towards next year's event. Do you believe that all the right things are in place for you guys to have that conducive relationship to work out these hurdles looking towards 2023?
Yes.
Beautiful. With that, we've come to the end of our time. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I would ask elected members that we should move to item 10.1, which is the 2022 Schoolies Festival. Can I please have a show of hands, those that would be happy to move forward to that motion or that item? Thank you very much. That's 2/3. So we'll move forward to item 10.1, which is Major Event Application 2022 Schoolies Festival. There are 3 items under that recommendation that you have before you, and I'll be guided by the chamber how you'd like to deal with those. Councillor Robertson. One by one. Are you moving the first one? Beautiful. Thank you. And someone to second that? Councillor Schofield. Would either of you like to speak to that first motion? No? Would anyone like to speak to the first motion? If not, we'll put a vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. That moves us to recommendation 2. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson moving that way and Councillor Robertson seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that motion? Councillor Robertson. Sorry, Councillor Robertson, your microphone's not on. Your microphone. Thank you.
I'd like to add a closure to the list that's there at the bottom of page 47. I would like to see the following consultation with my colleagues on the penguin monitoring. We would like to see the causeway closed to Granite Island for pedestrian traffic from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning for those 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yep, 4.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I certainly hear where you're coming from. As Councillor Henderson has moved that motion, you would have to get her consent in order to alter it in that manner. That said, the causeway isn't our road. We don't have the authority to close it. So it would have to be a separate application to request the Department for Transport and Infrastructure to close it.
Okay, so does a separate request require a separate motion or?
I dare say so. Yeah. It requires a separate motion, so we could do a
the
number
end?
4 at the end.
Right,
Yep.
done.
Beautiful. You're still happy to second it as it is, though?
Yes,
Awesome. Would any other members like to speak to this motion? If not, Councillor Henderson, would you like to close? Beautiful. We'll put that motion to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. That leaves recommendation 3. Would anyone like to move that way? Councillor Lilly moving that way. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Kemp, thank you. Would either of you like to speak to that motion? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The only thing I would, more for a note purposes, to support this motion is that an alternative site as a backup plan be organised sooner than later for this event. So that in the event that something does happen in the way of the weather, we have a second site already identified where schoolies can move to without little disruption. So I think if those conversations could commence sooner than later, if this could be taken as a note in support of that motion, that I think that would work in the right direction where we want to be.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Would any other members like to speak to this motion? Councillor Roberts.
so I think it's a variation, but on the last line of that motion, where it says presented to the council for consideration ahead of the 2023 event, could I have inserted in there 8 months ahead of the 23 event so that we get plenty of time for that to happen?
We'll seek Councillor Lilly and Councillor Kemp's consent if you're seeking an alteration, variation to the motion. Councillor Lilly?
No.
Okay. The mover of the motion is not open to that alteration, so if you would like to insert that, you would have to move an amendment formally.
Yep, I'll move an amendment.
Okay. So you're moving an amendment to insert between
8 months between
after
consideration and ahead.
Okay. Would anyone like to second that amendment? Due to lack of a seconder, the amendment fails. We come back to the original motion. Would any other elected members like to speak? Councillor Glasbrook.
Yeah, thank you. I just really want to point out that this is for a potential relocation. I think that's a very important word because it could well be the fact that it's not relocated at all. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Mann.
Yeah, thank you. Just to probably stress that same point around the potential of it, I don't necessarily see that overall benefit at this stage around moving it, but I think what's important in this recommendation are those discussions with the affected business community, as we heard from the example around getting stock delivered and things like that. That can be something that may be able to be arranged and negotiated with council, the event and businesses. So I think those discussions are important, and I thank Business Victor Harbor for bringing them to council. But yeah, at this stage, I'm not in favour of that relocation based on that discussion so far.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Further discussion before Councillor Lilly closes debate? Okay, Councillor Lilly.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Glasbrook, for pointing out the potential relocation line in there. I was aware of that, but also I reiterate Councillor Mann's comments with regards to Business Victor Harbor bringing this to the table. It's great. I think this motion here achieves what was set out today to open the discussion. So that was the intent of the deputation we heard, and this achieves the outcomes that they sought. And I think hopefully the Chamber's happy with that.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly, for closing debate. With that, we put recommendation 3 to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Robertson, I
Yeah.
believe that some wording has been prepared, am I right? It is coming up at the moment.
Okay.
So we've got that council request the Department for Infrastructure and Transport to close the causeway to pedestrian traffic for the duration of the Woolies Festival, that being 1700 hours Friday, November 2022 to 0600 hours Monday, the 28th of November 2022.
Sorry, no, it wasn't that. It was to close the causeway for the period, well, 5 o'clock, 1700 to 6 o'clock in the morning on each day.
On each day,
Not
for the whole period.
No,
Correct,
not for
okay.
the whole period, just for the for each day. So the causeway will be closed.
Noted. Thank you, Victor Harbour. We'll just amend that. Bear with us. If elected members have potential extra recommendations they'd like to put into motions, it's always handy to have them in writing beforehand, that some of them come up. So, now we have it. Sorry, after 0600 hours, can we insert the following morning and then we will get rid of the Monday because we don't want to close it Monday night. So we will have that council request Department for Infrastructure and Transport to close the causeway to pedestrian traffic for the evenings of the Schoolies Festival, that being from 1700 hours to 0600 hours the following morning on Friday the 25th of November, Saturday the 26th of November and Sunday the 27th of November. Councillor Robertson is happy with that. Would someone like to second this motion? Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Robertson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The concern on this is the experience from last year, whereby there were many people who went over to the island at night time. And bear in mind at the time of the year when Schoolies is on, the sun doesn't set till more or less 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And this is a time when the penguins are coming up, and there was a huge amount of drinking on the island. This is supposed to be a dry zone, and even the last few nights we've had people coming back with loads and loads of cartons and cans and bottles of alcoholic drinks that are being consumed on Granite Island. And but it's the disturbance of the penguins, and this is another critical breeding season for the penguins. We're down to 16 birds. It'll come up again several times in the agenda tonight. But if we go on like this, losing the birds and not building up the numbers on Granite Island, we will have none. And then Granite Island without penguins is like Victor Harbour without the Bluff, I would suggest. And so we need to make sure that all effort is put into on that weekend of making sure that the Granite Island does not become, like it was last year, a place where people went out to sleep out there as well as to carry on partying out there. They can have a great time, that's for sure, but in the area where they're having their parties, this is a place where we have penguins desperately trying to breed, and we need those penguins for our future tourism. So that's why I'm asking for this.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Glasbrook, do you wish to speak to this?
Now, just briefly, I can recall this having happened in the past, and I think the County Youth organised some of their green team to open and shut the gates. I don't think it was a huge impost, so I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. Would any other members like to contribute? Councillor Lilly.
I don't think it's a huge impost, but I do think that this is a responsibility of DIT to manage not only the causeway but the island, and a responsibility of SAPOL to manage anything that's happening in that space as well. So, well, I don't think it's a great impost. I do feel it's a bit of a shame that we're looking at 5 o'clock at night shutting off an island, an area, or requesting the shut off an area. These school leavers, many of them are adults. They come down here. They've got to take responsibility for their actions. I'll vote for it. I'll vote yes, but I don't think it's a. I think it's a bit out of place us asking DIT to look after that and or forcing them to do that. They're meant to be responsible. So is SAPOL.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Would any other members like to speak to this motion? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I support this motion on the grounds, of course, we need to include Department of Environment and Water because they run the island. So they need to be aware that this is happening. But for a small pain for some of the local community who will miss out going over there fishing, those types of things, I think we need to be showing our community that we are serious about protecting the penguins from events where there's huge crowds, could potentially, irrespective, you know, and because once alcohol's in, out goes responsibility, I think, of adults. That's been proven many times before, so I think we can't rely on that people will be responsible. But I think we need to support the penguins, and I think this is a good start in that process of seeking support and help from the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Schofield.
Thank you. Look, I don't see an issue in trying to preserve the penguins. The horse tram does have the contract for the closure of the gates and the opening of the gates in the morning. My thought in having a look at 5 o'clock, there's quite a few people that continually walk over to the causeway at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If they're going to do a round trip of the island, it's another 1.25 hours. So there's going to have to be quite a lot of communication put in place for when will the last person be allowed to go over to the island. The last horse tram comes back from the island about 4:20, but quite often passengers are left on the island to walk around. So those sorts of things that have to come be considered, and perhaps it may be better to have 6 o'clock at night, but that'll be up to the Department of Transport.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Robertson, would you like to close?
No, thanks, Deputy Mayor. No.
Beautiful. With that debate done, we'll move recommendation 4 over. And with item 10.1 concluded, we move back to item 7, which is questions from the gallery. There is one question that we have received this evening. It is from Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. My first question asked how many volunteers were registered with the Horse-Drawn Tram Authority in each of the last 4 years, and the second question asked how many volunteers were registered with the Coral Street Art Space each of the last 4 years. I'm trying to get an idea of the either the growth or the decline of volunteers at both those organisations, and I've got a pen. I'll just jot the answers down if they're slow enough.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. We do have the answers for you. In response to your questions, the first question, how many volunteers have been registered with the Victor Harbour Horse-drawn tram in each of the last 4 years? So 2019, we have approximately 8 to 10. 2020, we have approximately 5 to 6. 2021, we have approximately 3 to 4. And 2022, we have approximately 7 to 8. So a bit of up and down. And then in relation to the Coral Street Art Space, we have 2019, 35. 2020 is 28. 2021 is 17. And 2022 is 13. The reason for higher numbers in 2019 and 2020 was during this time, Council accepted volunteers for one exhibition. It then changed in late 2020 to volunteers needing to commit throughout the year as training induction was too resource intensive. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Thank you for the information. I would have hoped that there were more at the horse-drawn tram, but it's good to see that bump up in the last year from that rather alarming 3 to 4.
That's it. Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you very much for the information.
Now, we do have a couple other community members in the gallery this evening that would like us or are here to hear our discussion around 12.5, which is the Sport and Rec Precinct. So therefore, I would like us to move to that item next, but I would need a 2/3 show of hands in order to do so. Are elected members willing to do so? Sorry. Yep, beautiful. With that, we'll move to 12.5, which is the Regional Community Sport and Recreation Precinct Draft Concept Design and Phase 2 Consultation. There are 4 recommendations there, and I'll be guided by the Chamber as to how you wish to deal with them. Don't all jump at it at once. We're on page 124. Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Moving to receive and note the report, and Councillor Brian Little seconding that one. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to receiving and noting the report? Is that your hand, Councillor Robertson?
Sorry, Chair, I was just getting to the page. Were you calling for just the first one, or?
Yeah, so we have Councillor Glasbrook and Councillor Little moving and seconding the first one, which is just receiving and noting. Yeah, beautiful. If there's no discussion on that one, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Would someone like to move Councillor Little, moving all 3? Or one?
No, I'll move number 2. I'll do it separately.
Beautiful, thank you. Someone to second that, Councillor Schofield. Would either of you like to speak to that motion? Councillor Little? No? No worries. Would any other elected members like to speak to that motion? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thanks, Deputy Mayor. The design for the concept design that we've received, I would like to see that we present a rather full explanation of what's going on for this before we go out here to phase 2 consultation. There's nothing mentioned in the concept design about whether this whole structure or the whole area is energy positive. And I understand that I think that we keep on talking about this issue of being, you know, energy positive and how important this stuff is to the future of climate change, yada, yada, yada. So to me, the answer comes back, well, why aren't we putting this into our design? Is that, oh, that comes later and that's going to be much further down the track. In the meantime, we're just into concept designs. To me, a really important part about those concept designs is we're upfront that yes, this will be an energy positive complex, that it will produce at least all the electricity that it's needed on the spot. That may add quite a few dollars to the cost of the, but it may not also. And so to me, I'd like to see that being something that's out the front. The only thing mentioned in this design is somewhere at the back where we've got a wall full of ferns and stuff like that, but this is somehow making it green. We need to have the full costs included or at least estimated, because we have this constant arrangement whereby the cost is this. Oh, okay, it's only the capital cost. Oh, it's only the capital cost, but we haven't included the landscaping. I think at least what we should be putting forward to our community is a full accounting for, even if it's just an estimate, like this is an order of magnitude estimate, a couple of $100,000 for landscaping, but not that somewhere in the detail that it's mentioned that this doesn't include the landscaping. That we include in that also the management model. That's going to have a significant impact on the other aspect of this development, which doesn't get any airspace at all, but it should, because if the architects design the building in a certain way, they should know, okay, with the benefit of IT and other modern management devices, that you may be able to reduce the amount of people employed to run the place, but still in all, you need to be able to lay out a management model, and then most importantly, estimates of the operating costs. Because we know from when we went further down the track with Treadwell on operating costs for when the site was originally at Gillespie's, that the operating costs were considerable, well over $1 million a year. And when we add in, for every $1 million a year, we add into the costs of the operating costs of the facility, which is a regional facility, but it's run out of the pockets of Victor Harbor ratepayers, adds 3% to the total rate bill. And then there's no mention in there of the staging also. This will probably be, we get very, very lucky, this will be a project that can be done in one hit, albeit the construction would take place over probably 2 financial years. But it, to me, it's one that we need to be rather more fulsome in our estimations of what this is going to be, both in capital cost for all the elements of it and also the operating cost. So to me, I would like to see this is what we include in this document, which is presently not there.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Are there other members that would like to contribute? Councillor Henderson.
I'm pleased Councillor Robertson mentioned the staging, because I do think that is one possible way that the future councils who sit in this chamber will be able to make this project a reality. But my other comment is to remind Councillor Robertson that this council did pass a motion to become carbon neutral by 2030, and therefore I take that to assume that this building will be carbon neutral as part of our infrastructure, as will every other council-owned property.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Are there any other members that would like to speak to this motion? Councillor Glasbrook.
I'll just ask a question. I wanted to clarify this earlier, but I forgot. How many courts is included, basketball courts is included in this design? It's in here.
Director Hayden.
Thank you. Through the chair, 4.
It is 4. Thank you.
Councillor Robertson, you've got a question? Yep.
Sorry, a question. The issues that I've just raised, are they going to be included in the design before it goes out, or not?
I think I'll pass to Director Hayter for this one.
Thank you. Through the chair. Councillor Robertson, I'll try and answer each of those separately, each of the 4 items that you raised. So in terms of the concept design and around energy positive and climate credentials and sustainability and all those things, yes, we are. It won't be as fulsome as you're hoping in terms of the concept design. We are still trying to work on that concept design and what that looks like for community. That is something that we will take into account when we get to the detailed design. In terms of its climate credentials, we are looking much more broadly than just being energy positive. There's a whole raft of other things in terms of water, in terms of heat refuge. This is, you know, as we've spoken about before, this will be our largest piece of community infrastructure. So we need to think about things like, is it suitable for heat refuge for our community, and does it have enough facilities to potentially host community for, you know, overnight or days. So there's a raft of considerations around sustainability, not just energy positive, but we will not have that covered fully in the draft concept for consultation. In terms of the full cost estimate, again, we need to know what it is that we need to develop the concept plan a little more to be able to get a full cost estimate done. So we have got a draft cost estimate, but in terms of everything that is or isn't going to be included, we will get that when we know what the concept is before we go to detailed design. In terms of the operating model, as we've mentioned before, our intent is to do an operating and an investment model, and that's one of the things that we have slated during the September to November period to undertake, and that is in the timeline and it is in our project plan. And in terms of the staging, again, yes, we intend to develop a staging plan. We've spoken with the Office for Rec and Sport. They have encouraged us to continue in terms of the planning and the designing with the whole thing, obviously, because there potentially is some funding opportunities, either state or Commonwealth. But in the first instance, we will design the whole thing and then break it down into stages.
Thank you, Director Hayter. Does that bring any clarity to it, Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Chair, it does. But I mean, what Director Hayter said was excellent. So, I mean, if there's a transcript out of that, that could be stuck into this model just to say that these things are going to happen. I appreciate that there will be dollar figures won't be able to be put on all of them. But for someone that's looking, for a member of the community that's looking at and asking those questions about...
Point of order. Councillor Robertson's had his time to debate. If there's not another question, can we move on?
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. I take your point of order and I will accept it. We have asked the question, was it debate earlier? Unless there is another question, Councillor Robertson.
Yes.
What is the question?
Could Director Hayter's explanation there be included in the
documentation,
the concept plan that goes to consultation?
Director Hayter.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Robertson. Perhaps I could expand on that sustainability statement and cover off on those points that you raised.
Yeah.
Excellent. Are there any other members that would like to speak to this motion? Councillor Glasbrook, you have a question?
No. I asked a question
Yes,
first time.
question before,
Yeah. This is a bit of a question and a statement. I know this is a concept design. It does look very flash to me. Is it possible for us to go out to our community with 2 options? I've seen many sport facilities in regional areas that are, you know, not as glamorous as this. They're a bit square and boxy. I understand that, and you know, perhaps a tilt up, or I just think $36.75 million is a lot of money, and I know that's for the grand scheme, and Victor Harbour seems to like to always have the grand one. Perhaps if we gave our community the opportunity, they might come back and say we would be happy with a more simple structure that would still meet our needs. I would like to know that. If we just go out with one, as I say, grand and seemingly very expensive option, it's not really giving them a choice. So It's a question and a statement all at the same time.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Are you seeking an answer to the question? Yeah. Director Haber.
Thank you, through the chair. I guess in terms of less grand option, just noting that we have reduced the size already by about 4,000 square metres on the Gillespie one. We've taken out a whole lot of features, and noting that over the last 3 years, infrastructure costs have gone up about 50%. So in terms of, this is what the community has told us they need. It's not the wish list of everything they told us they would like. So in terms of a less grand plan, I'm just wondering how we might do that, like what we're going to cut off, because we also spoke at our workshops about future proofing. So, and we could chop off a court or two, but then that wouldn't meet requirements. We could make, for example, the gymnastics space suitable for local rather than regional. So the challenge really for us, because essentially that's what the two primary spaces are, is the forecourts for multi-use courts, obviously for basketball and others. And then the other space is the square meterage suitable for regional gymnastics. And then there is a smaller space along the gymnastics that potentially is community use. So we could certainly reduce it, but it would not meet what the community has told us they need, not what they want, but what they need.
Can I just clarify? Thank you. Yes, no, I wasn't actually talking about making it smaller. I was really just talking about building techniques, and I know these are concept pictures and things in here, but they're all very, very flash and very expensive. You know, you don't have to be a builder to work out that some of these things in here are architecturally designed and top shelf and whatever else. That's what I was getting at, just a little bit more of a plain Jane. Meet our budget, you know. But anyway, it's only my opinion. Not make it smaller, it wasn't what I was saying.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Robertson, you put your hand up again. You got another question?
Thanks, Deputy Chair. Yeah, on the bottom of page 126, the second paragraph from the bottom there, an acknowledgement that the precinct will not meet all of the sport and recreation requirements for our growing community. But interesting, the next line is, I think, really important, that it says a dispersed model of open space planning will need to accompany the precinct design, and that the open space strategy will be developed in parallel with the precinct planning, so the council and community can
Point of order.
see the broader range of activities.
Point of order.
What
Is this
your
a
point of
question once again, or is it reading from a document that we can all read that's in front of us and having debate?
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I'll
That
ask
question,
Councillor
yeah.
Robertson to get directly to the question.
Yeah,
Can we put the motion, please?
Councillor Schofield's moving a formal motion. As you seconded the motion, I believe under our policy for meeting procedures, you are allowed to move a formal motion as the seconder. But just let me clarify that one. Yeah, you can. So the formal motion takes precedence over everything else. Councillor Schofield's moved to put the motion. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Henderson is seconding that we put the motion, that the motion be put. It's formal motions, therefore there is no debate. All those in favour of the formal motion to put the motion? Those against? That formal motion is lost. Councillor Robertson, your question.
yes, Deputy Chairman, thank you. The accompanying planning that's going to be done for the dispersed model, will that be coming out at all with the in this process of this phase of the development of this project?
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Director Hayter.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, Councillor Robertson, it will be. So this is something you may recall in the workshops we spoke about. It was something that council just approved the budget for. So we are just getting the procurement plan together at the moment for this, but our idea is to initially do the procurement, start some of that stakeholder consultation, and then do the community engagement, dovetail that synchronously with the next round of community engagement for the master plan. So yes, our idea is that it will be synchronous so that the community, those particularly those that aren't benefiting from Lot 202 development, will see themselves reflected in that bigger picture plan.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Director Hayter. Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Lidley, would you like to close debate on this item?
Yeah, I would like to receive the draft concept design and then move on to number 3, which is to endorse the design.
Thank you, Councillor Lidley. With that, we put the motion. All those in favour? That motion's carried. We move on to the remaining 2 recommendations. Would someone like to move one or both of them?
I'll have a go at moving both.
Thank you, Councillor Lidley. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Henderson seconding that one. Would either of you like to speak to that motion? No? Would anyone like to speak to that motion? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question. In recommendation number 3, it talks about public consultation, but in the commentary, it talks about consultation with key stakeholders. Now, the community may see this as a public consultation for all the broader community to have input, but the commentary talks about stakeholders. So could I have a clarification around that, please? Or should we change the recommendation to reflect exactly what's going to take place?
Director Hayter.
Thank you. Through the chair. So during caretaker period, we won't be undertaking any community consultation. So during the caretaker period, we will still do some consultation directly with those stakeholders. For example, cultural consultation, some of the clubs directly involved. And then once we get through caretaker and we've had the opportunity to brief the new council, we'll launch into the community, the broader community engagement.
Thank you. I've seen your draft. Second question, should then recommendation reflect the stakeholders' engagement, not so much a public consultation, because it gives the wrong impression to me that the community may see this as a broader public consultation if they read this document, the recommendation.
Director Hayter.
Thank you. Through the chair. We could change the recommendation, although it says guided by the communications and engagement strategy, and in the communications and engagement strategy, it does set out the differentiation between the key stakeholder and the community. It's got a fairly distinct timeline there. And similarly, on page 127, we have set out there the difference between the key stakeholder consultation and the stage 2 of the community consultation, just to try and get some clarity around that we will not be doing community consultation during caretaker.
Thank you for the clarity. We'll let that one sit on the table, I guess. From my perspective, I just felt that the wording wasn't quite correct. But anyway, with your key deliverables, another question. I see the potential reports at item 9, May, June 23, considering all the work that's been done on this to date and will be done with economic impact analysis, should we not bring that potential report further up the list to around about maybe December, January 23? Because one of the issues about this accepting this concept design is the fact that, yes, we have some capital project costs, but we don't have no operating costs on how much it's really going to cost us. And I think if we really want to look at the economic impact analysis, we need to incorporate the potential report in that period as well in order for this to go ahead. I'm not against this design, this concept, but I think that before we move too far down the pathway, I think we need to have further and more qualitative information before we start looking at community engagement too, and consultation outcomes and consolidated concept plans, etc. So just a question for these SMT to just think about, could they bring it forward after this process has taken place? And I think the question, to finish off within my 5 minutes, the reduction of the 4,000 square metres is mainly around the athletics oval and the soccer ground off Gillespie land, is it not? Or is the footprint of the building? Thank you for that. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp, for your mix of commentary and questions. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? If not, Councillor Lidley, in closing? No? I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That motion's carried. Thank you very much, members. With item 12.5 concluded, we move back to item 8, which is petitions, of which there are none, which puts us at item 9.1, which is outstanding resolutions on page 7. The recommendation is that we receive and note the report. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Mann moving that way and Councillor Henderson seconding. Speak to that. If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. We move on to item 9.2, which is the delegations register, partial review. There are 3 recommendations there. I'll be guided by the chamber as how you'd like to deal with them. Councillor Kemp.
Considering they're all very relevant to each other, I'll move them on block.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Schofield, thank you very much. Would either of you like to speak to those?
Yeah.
Councillor Kemp.
Just say thank you to the staff. For this is not an easy job to do when you go through this type of legislation and pick out the I's and cross the T's and dot the I's to actually get this done. I had a quick read through it and had a spoke to Kyla Walker about the impacts on this to our council, and there's very minimal impact. It's just really about reporting lines and various things like that, and to ensure that we're covered okay. But good job done.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Would other members like to speak to this motion? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Chair. Yeah, echo Councillor Kemp's comments. Great job. It's there's a lot of work in this. In section 188, which doesn't have page numbers on this, but if you follow down on the statutory provision side, it's about halfway through the thing there. It mentions minor charges. What are these? What's considered to be minor charges?
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Bear with us a sec while we get to the right page. And it's in the attachment. You're talking about in the attachment, yes, Councillor Robertson?
Hmm?
Page number what from the attachment?
They don't have page numbers on them. But you can follow down.
188, yeah?
On the statutory, the second column, the statutory provision. It's there's no way of section 188, okay. Part 1, Part C. Impose fees and charges for carrying out work at a person's request, delegated to the CEO. Delegation is applicable for the purpose of setting minor, urgent or short-term fees and charges. I just wondered if there was a...
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I think Group Manager Knight Stacey has the answer you're seeking.
Thank you, through the chair. There is no definition in terms of in the delegation register of minor, but what we would be considering in terms of minor is items that don't substantially change the budget or affect a policy position of council, and for the expediency of moving forward would be delegated to the CEO.
Okay. Yeah. There's one also on the open space distribution, open space contribution scheme, section 198. The subdivision where there's more than 20 allotments to be created, is the CEO required to, and the CEO is delegated for this, is the CEO required to notify the council in the case of these subdivisions?
Thank you, Councillor Robertson.
Maybe this is under the Planning Act. Sorry, yeah, it's
Planning
under
Act.
the Planning Act one.
Right. These are prime examples of questions that, if you meeting, could have been directed towards administration and dealt with in the appropriate
sure.
manner. Acting Director Knight Stacey has the answer for you now.
Thank you through the chair. So it is in regards to the Planning Act, that one, and there's no requirement for the CEO to consult with council on that, but there's no reason if there was something that was of interest to council that we couldn't provide that in a weekly update. We do have a register for contributions made under open space or car park contributions, and we actually have a separate bank account that holds those as well.
Okay, thank you.
Beautiful. Councillor Henderson, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to commend our staff who are constantly on top of the changes to the legislation and keeping us up to date with all of these changes. It's been very informative throughout this whole term.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Kemp, in closing? No? We'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Move on to item 9.3, which is 2023 Australia Day Awards. There are 4 recommendations before you. I'll be guided to you as you handle them.
I'm going to declare a perceived conflict of interest in this. I can explain that perceived conflict of interest. That being that I am a journalist, and in my role as a journalist, I will almost certainly at some point in time cover it as a story or make mention of our Australia Day award winners and their potentially also the process of their selection. I've done this for over 30 years in my role as a journalist, including over the past 3 and a bit years that I've been a councillor. But it appears from recent correspondence and moves by at least one elected member and sections of this community that there's a rather pathetic sentiment that a councillor cannot be a journalist and do their job. Must be that this is a very small and very poorly informed group of people consider that a councillor cannot be a journalist and not the other way around.
Point of order.
As I've been a journalist.
Councillor Robertson, yes.
Point of order, I think Councillor Littley is right off the mark. I think we've heard enough about his explanation as to why he's going to have a perceived conflict of interest, and why doesn't he just tell us what he's going to do about it rather
Thank
than
you, Councillor
carrying
Robertson.
on.
Yes, I understand your point, and I think that maybe we could lose some of the embellished language.
Okay.
Get to declaring the interest.
Given the absolute ridiculousness of this councillor and his small group of supporters take on my profession, it is only a perceived conflict of interest, and I will remain in the chamber, debate and vote.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. We're left with the 4 recommendations in front of us. Councillor Henderson.
I'd like to move them on block.
Move all 4 on block. Thank you. Councillor Schofield seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? No? Councillor Schofield? No? Would any members like to speak to this motion? If not, we'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. We now move on to item 9.4, Risk Management Strategic Review of Service Levels. There are 7 recommendations in front of us. Some of them have to be handled by themselves. The first one is that we receive and note the report. Let's start there. Councillor Kemp.
Yes, and also like to forecast that I'll be putting up another motion at the end of the debate.
Thank you. Do you have that in writing? We'd appreciate that now if you could. This gives Katie some time to type it up. So Councillor Kemp, you're happy to move that we receive and note the report though? Correct, beautiful. And someone to second that, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Kemp, as you return to your seat, do you wish to speak to receiving and noting the report? No, you're fine. Councillor Henderson. Would anyone like to speak to recommendation 1? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? You? Councillor Henderson. You're right. Now we are left with the remaining 6 recommendations plus a foreshadowed one from Councillor Kemp. Councillor Henderson.
I'll move number 2.
Number 2, beautiful. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Mann. Would either of you like to speak to that motion? Councillor Henderson.
Yes, I think at this stage it's very logical to dissolve the City Activation Strategic Planning Advisory Committee. In many ways, even if we weren't going into caretaker mode, there has been quite a lot of duplication with discussions in this committee and the same discussions, the same rhetoric carried over to the ordinary council meetings, which has been costly in terms of time and in terms of staff resources. Under the terms of reference and the roles and responsibilities of members, it reads that we as the members, we form the committee, should be aware of the need for efficiency and effectiveness. And we should also be well informed on issues before the meeting and prepare adequately for these meetings and seek additional information if required before the meeting, so that not using valuable time in the meetings to ask the questions and seek that information during the meetings themselves. So at this point in time, logical move, the solution of the City Activation and Strategic Planning Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to thank the committee members of that committee for their time that they've put into that. Appreciate their recommendations that they come up with, and their work will be missed, but I think it's for the best for the community and the council.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Would any other members like to speak to this motion? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll be speaking against the motion. We're constantly being told we must think strategically and not get into the weeds of operations of council. Here is a committee that does that, thinks strategically. And sometimes, yes, it's great if we can get our information and research and questions up front, but sometimes, as the Deputy Mayor said tonight in another item, that sometimes questions come to your head straight away while you're listening to other people speak and the debates that goes on, which is fantastic because that's what it's all about. It's about listening to other people speak and learn from them as well, you know, because they may have thought of something that you haven't. So I think it's a backward step because a new council may implement this again in 8 weeks' time or 12 weeks, whenever, because it is about strategic thinking. It's about strategic planning and decision making in direction. And us to, you know, go get rid of it is not the way we should be showing to our community how we think strategically and work as a group. We can reformat the committee. We can look at what it can actually deliver and fine-tune it, you know, in that respect. But to get rid of it, I think is a wrong move. So I won't be supporting this one.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Would any other members like to contribute to debate? If not, Councillor Henderson, closing.
I would just like to reiterate that unfortunately this committee has become less productive than it could be.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. In closing debate, will you put recommendation 2 to the vote? All those in favour? And those against? That motion is carried.
Call a division.
Councillor Kemp has called a division on that motion. Can all those in favour please stand? For the motion, Councillor Mann, Councillor Lidley, Councillor Glasbrook, Councillor Robertson, Councillor Schofield, and Councillor Henderson. Those against? Councillor Kemp. With the division, that motion is carried. Okay, we move on. Recommendations 3 through 7 still remain, noting that recommendation 5 has to be dealt with by itself. Who would like to move? Councillor Robertson, moving just recommendation 3? Okay. Anyone would like to second Councillor Robertson's motion? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Robertson, do you wish to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah. This particular item, along with a number of the others, I think don't help us in terms of the business of trying to improve the output from the council administration. I think that it would not be a good look that we take out reflect longer timeframes than 5 days to return a phone call, when in fact, modern phone systems, all phone calls can have a automatic response to them saying that, we're going to get back to you as soon as possible. At least the person that's making that call knows that the call has been received, even if it's by a robot, and at the time, putting a time limit on it that's going to take it out to 5 days when the phone system can make it the same day or the same hour, to me, is not a good look for where we're heading. And 14 days to respond to written correspondence, similarly, I think that's the acknowledgement of a correspondence. I guess mostly these days it's emails, but even if it's a letter, that the correspondence can go back to say, we've got your letter, we're working on it, and then, but to say that we can take up to 14, or that we're going to take 14 days to respond to is even in this very outdated operating system that we're trying to replace, that having not using the tools that are embedded in it to be able to make responses, to me, is not a good sell at all. So I won't be voting for this.
Just to be clear, Councillor Robertson, you've moved a motion that you will not be voting for. I know you can do that. I'm just making sure that you're clear on what you're doing. Yes.
Yep.
Beautiful. Right. Thank you. Councillor Henderson, you seconded the motion. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, thank you. Look, as the information tells us, and as our workshop pointed out, we are operating in very unusual circumstances at this point in time. This doesn't have to be a permanent measure, but I think it's a vital measure at this time. And we're still returning phone calls, we're still replying to correspondence. There are many, many businesses operating under unusual circumstances, and a lot of businesses out there are having the same problems. And I know that I don't get replies from some businesses for more than 5 days, sometimes 7 days. So we're not unusual in the world today. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Glasbrook.
Yes, can I ask a question, please? Does council have the ability to automatically reply to emails in particular, and even phone calls?
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Acting Director Knight Stacey.
Thank you, through the chair. So we do automatically do that. If an email comes through, the correspondent will receive an acknowledgement. If a phone message is left, obviously there's a phone message that we will get back to them as soon as we can. This is more about the requests for information or additional data, and our ability to provide responses to that with a number of staff away at any given time.
Thank you, Acting Director.
Thank you. That's great. I'm glad, because I've dealt with a few lately, and that's exactly what's happened. And I think that's, at least you sent the email with the right address and whatever. So the other thing that I did want to mention was the same as what Councillor Henderson was, for what the time period that you're intending to have this in place. Is there any idea on that?
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Acting Director Knight Stacey.
Thank you, through the chair. We're basically putting up some of these recommendations to assist us in more so the short term, particularly this one. Currently, as elected members are aware, we have a number of staff vacancies, and COVID continues to wreak havoc in terms of people being off sick and isolating. So this is just to provide us with a bit of breathing space so that we can still respond appropriately, but in recognition that we may not have the relevant staff member here to do that at the time that the correspondence comes in.
Thank you, Acting Director. Would other members like to speak to this motion? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, I won't be supporting this one or the rest of them actually because I attended the Audit Committee this afternoon and to listen to, you know, how this is all panning out through the strategic risk register and the impacts on the community, that they felt that this will not do much towards solving the problems in isolation by itself. It needs other measures. And at the moment, it hasn't been identified to us exactly what areas of the organisation are really understaffed and they can't do the job. Also, we've been told that there's a lot of staff are doing multiple roles. So you've got to start thinking about, you know, what other measures can we put in place to help alleviate the pressures and stress on staff, not just these small ones here. I think there should have been a suite of them, additional to what was here presented. I know it can be work in progress, and one of the things that I found from the community is that even with a full complement of staff, they still don't get response back from council. That's why they come to councillors, elected members, to raise issues of concerns because they haven't been gotten back to in time. So again, I think that if we are down on staff, you know, making this type of process here is not going to alleviate much in the effort in that area. I mean, whether we've got staff or not, if they don't answer the responses to telephone calls and letters or inquiries or information and things like that, just that they can't be provided, and it's given on the day. And I think the community would understand that if they went in there for some information, so I'm sorry, we're so short staffed, we can't get this to you for another 10 days, would that be okay? I think that's a better communication. Make a band on. I think we need to, you know, be open and honest with them when they want that support. So that's why I won't be supporting, because I think, you know, we need to be looking at other areas of as well, and not affecting the community to that degree.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Is there any further discussion of this item? Councillor Schofield.
Thank you. Yes, look, I will support this. I understand wholeheartedly where the staff are coming from. With our population plus people from outside our community, I wonder sometimes how the staff actually cope with the amount of phone calls and information that is requested. And quite often it does take some time to look up and find the right answers for that particular inquiry. Okay, it may not be the best thing, but it is a start. And we have to start somewhere, and that will give the staff a little bit more time to have a look at other avenues that's going to assist them. So I do support this.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Would any other members like to speak to this? Councillor Lilley.
Yeah, I'll support this. I live in the real world. I've been experiencing throughout my time as a councillor, working in large organisations, actually working and seeing the impacts on all sorts of operations where staff shortages have really impacted them. And I think that the staff are doing a cracking job, and anything that they come up with to try to help them overcome some of those shortages and work through it, I think this is at least goes some way to that, so I'll support it.
Thank you, Councillor Lilley. Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Robertson, in closing.
No, thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. with that, we put recommendation 3 to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. We call a division on that item. Those in favour, please stand. Yes. For the motion, Councillor Mann, Councillor Lidley, Councillor Glasbrook, Councillor Schofield, and Councillor Henderson. Those against the motion, Councillor Kemp and Councillor Robertson. That motion is carried. We now have recommendation 4 in front of us. Councillor Schofield, you'd like to move that way?
No, I'd just like to ask the leave of the meeting if there are any further divisions, and I'm in favour. Could I please remain seated?
I think just show of hands with that one. Is everyone okay with that?
Thank you.
Elected members. We'll just ask for a verbal response from you in that case, Councillor Schofield, so that it is clear to both us and those watching. We have recommendation 4. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Schofield moving. So, would someone like to second that? Councillor Mann, would either of you like to speak? No? Would anyone like to speak to recommendation 4? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm not sure why this is here, because under the changing of page 34, policy reviews, the majority of policy reviews are straightforward and do not result in material changes. So is it that much of a job to do this? But also delaying for up to 2 years, getting us out of the situation where we're on top of the workload is kind of frightening. And I think that all the policies to be reviewed here, there are some that are going to need really, really urgent, like the human resources policies. Our new computer resources program is going to ensure that. And not having that done for up to 2 years is, to me, if we have to bring in additional resources, to consultant resources to help do that. But we have a good record in this council of doing this sort of work, and I think that it's not necessary for us to impose a 2-year moratorium on doing this.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I won't be supporting this motion on the same grounds similar to what Councillor Robertson has said, but also reiterate from the Audit Committee that not dealing with your policies in a timely manner, whether it's legislation or not, if things change in the world and then our policies don't reflect that, then that could impact negatively on council in the future. So this is something that we need to be abreast of at all times to ensure that we're capturing the changes and reflect them in our policies to protect the community and protect the council, ensuring that they do their job properly. So to me, this is really should not be touched. We should run through the process like we normally do. Of course, there's always going to be delays at times due to commitments or workloads or things like that, and that always can be accepted. But to actually do a blanket stop on it on some policies is really, I think, is high risk. And I think the Audit Committee, from my understanding, was very concerned if council went down this pathway. So if we don't listen to our Audit Committee, then, gosh, who do we listen to?
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Is there any further discussion in relation to this matter? Councillor Henderson.
In my opinion, 2 years is not a very long time period. And I would have thought that within a term of a council, that would cover 2 reviews within their term. So I think that's quite a good frequency myself.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Schofield, you move this motion. Would you like to close debate? No. With that, debate is closed and I put recommendation 4 to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That motion's carried.
All of division, thank you.
Councillor Kemp called a division. All those in favour, please stand. Awesome. Those in favour, Councillor Mann, Councillor Lilley, Councillor Schofield, are you voting in favour of this item? Can you just say that into the microphone, please? Just so those, if they're watching at home, can hear you.
I am voting in favour.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Henderson. Those against, Councillor Glasbrook, Councillor Kemp, and Councillor Robertson. That motion's carried. We move on to recommendation 5, which needs to be handled by itself. Would someone like to move that way? Don't all jump at it at once. If not, we will. Councillor Schofield, you'd like to move recommendation 5? Would someone like to second that? If not, that motion will lapse for want of seconder. Councillor Mann, you are seconding the motion.
If the mover would be agreeable to a variation that this is for a period of 6 months during, as we've heard from staff and administration, that there are significant issues at the moment and a lot of these measures are in the short term, and whilst this is a motion that is something that can help them, I think for that 6 month period, if that's able to be done, that could be our way of assisting.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. The acting CEO did bring to my attention while you were speaking the fact that the new council will have to deal with its practice for meeting procedures very early in its term, and so that automatic review of this will happen early in the next term of council. So there would be that option for the new council to go one way or the other with it.
Great. Based on that, I'm happy to support this as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Other members would like to contribute to debate. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I really don't see how this is going to help us in any significant way with the problems we have with staffing at present and workload. Of course, it does impose a considerable burden on elected members. We have 400 pages in this particular meeting tonight, over 400 actually in the agenda. And yeah, when we get 5 days to look at it, you've pretty well got to give away your weekend. So with 3 days, that means it gets issued on a Friday afternoon or up to a Friday afternoon. Then you've got Saturday, Sunday and Monday before 5 o'clock to read it, to give it proper consideration. And to me, that's not efficient operations. It doesn't give the council the right sort of time to be able to give proper consideration to that. And since we've cancelled some of the arrangements with regard to CASPAC meetings, the periods of consultation and so forth are also being attenuated. So what does that mean in terms of the quality of time that's being given for proper consideration to agendas, which are pretty large in most cases? So definitely will not be voting for this.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Glasbrook.
I will just clarify that I think we'll receive it Thursday night, because 3 clear days is all day Friday, all day Saturday and all day Sunday. It doesn't include Monday and it doesn't include. So just to clarify what you just said, I think was incorrect. So, but I still agree, I won't be supporting it. And look, you know, I was the one who was very strongly in favour of this at the time. I think it's important that they have that people have 5 days in particular with the new council coming along. When I was elected, you know, I took things fairly seriously and I read the agenda from the front to the back and then from the back to the front. And then I read the bits that I didn't understand again. And, you know, I'm not the best reader and whatever else, but to expect people, particularly people who are working, to only really have their weekend, Saturday and Sunday, to read an agenda, I think is a little unfair personally. I know the staff are having issues, but I think it's also very important for elected members to read the agenda and to be informed and to make informed decisions. So, you know, I think it's a lot to ask, as Councillor Robertson said, for people to absorb all of this at times, you know, potentially in 2 days if you work. So I think, I know it is a burden to the staff, but I think it's an important burden and I think that it's value for the council, so I won't be supporting this one.
Thank you, Councillor Glassbrook. Councillor Lilly.
First of all, just to address something that Councillor Robertson said, I feel that if it's being proposed by administration that it's of some form of saving, then it must be of some form of saving. And I think that the comment about it not achieving much is probably a little bit out of line. I also suggest I give great consideration to the agenda, and I always deal with it over 2 days because I'm working full time plus. I'm guessing I'm a little bit busier than some other members of the council, so I always absorb it over the weekends. So it's no skin off my nose to have a couple of days less because that's when I do get into my agenda over the weekends.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, I won't be supporting this. Go back to the Audit Committee. They don't see this as these initiatives a great time savers. Overall, there are greater areas we could work on to save staff time. And that, to me, this looks like you know, a bit of a hit at the elected members group. Because sometimes, yes, and people read at their own rate, they absorb at their own rate, depending on who they are and their education. But the whole thing is about reading, researching, understanding, and seeking further information if you require it. Because this is the time it's what we have here is where we make decisions from. And if you really need to, I believe, is to be given the time and thank the council previously who gave us stick to the 3 days of legislation, and I think they saw the worth of that councils can be better informed if they've got better time instead of trying to squeeze it in and compete with other private parts of their lives as well. We all want to have a work-life balance where we possibly can, but for decision making and to have it done correctly, I think 5 days is very important and very supportive of the elected members to do their job efficiently and effectively for their community.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I think the point you raise in terms of elected members using the 5 days to seek clarification is a really important one. Councillor Mann, you had your hand up. You've already, no, you haven't already
spoke to the variation,
yeah.
If that, or if I can
You've
speak.
seconded it, so do you have a question, I guess?
I guess at that time I didn't speak and ask whether I'd be given the opportunity to speak now, as previously had spoken to the variation.
It's not our practice that the seconder can withhold their speaking right, but I will put it open to the elected members as to whether they'd like to give you the right to speak now.
Oh, if that's the case, I probably won't add anything new, so that's
Okay.
good.
No worries, Councillor Mann. Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Schofield, would you like to close?
Thank you. I've listened to the arguments against this and I sort of reflected a little bit on why we become elected members. It is not a 9 to 5, 5 day a week commitment that we make to our community. 3 clear days, I think, is sufficient. There's quite a few boards that I've sat on and that's what you're given. I also look at staff, and if this has been put up by our staff for a particular reason, then I think it's worth the consideration. But also bearing in mind, we only have, another 1 or 2 council meetings before there will be a new council elected. So given what is happening with our work staff at the moment, I'm more than happy to assist in any way that I can. And so therefore that is the reason that I actually moved this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. In closing debate, we'll put recommendation 5 to the vote. All those in favour and those against, that motion is carried.
For division, thank you.
Calls for a division. Those in favour. And those for, Councillor Mann, Councillor Lilley, Councillor Schofield, are you in favour of this motion?
I am in favour of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Henderson. Those against are Councillor Glasbrook, Councillor Kemp and Councillor Robertson. That is not a 2/3 majority. You're right. In which case this motion does not pass. It is lost. The motion is lost. We move on to recommendation 6. For clarity, because it is a change to the procedures at meetings regulations, we need a 2/3 majority in order to pass the motion. So it is not a 2/3 majority. It would have required 5 councillors in favour, and therefore the motion is lost. We move on to items recommendations 6 and 7. Someone like to move either of those? Councillor Henderson. Moving councillor recommendation 6. Someone to second that? Councillor Lilley, would either of you like to speak to that motion? No. Would anyone like to speak to that motion? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Could I, sorry, Deputy Mayor. I would just like to ask, please, questions as to A, B and C here. What exactly is meant by this? Council meeting reports is the first instance. Only those requiring a council decision. In the end, aren't all of these requiring a council decision?
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. So what is meant by A, B and C under the recommendation?
Yeah.
The acting CEO can answer that for you.
Thank you, through the chair. So a number of council reports are brought here just purely for you to receive a note. It's been largely an evolution of the council in order to tailor information needs to the individual preferences of council members, and they're not for items that actually require a council decision. It's simply a way of informing you when there are other more efficient ways of informing the council of information. Information will continue to be provided to council members, but via the most appropriate communication channel. That's ultimately looking at the most efficient and effective mechanism for communicating, depending on what that topic actually is. Providing a public council report as opposed to some other kind of communique, even a verbal update, whether it's in a public briefing, all of those things take a whole lot less administrative effort than, say, a formal council report. And it might even be website information using your elected member weekly update, could be via an email, considerably less resource intensive. So if we're looking at ways to meaningfully reduce the administrative burden on a depleted staff, that's what we're meaning by that. Thirdly, so project reporting via regular quarterly reporting processes, except where otherwise necessary. So there are some reporting mechanisms for our main projects, and that's via the CEO Performance Review Committee, and then those project reports also come to council, and we also do annual reporting against our business plan as well. We have, again, tailored our reporting to the individual preferences of elected members in some instances, and I use the example of the corporate systems project updates. It's the only project where we provide a formal report, again, to receive a note to the council, and we also provide weekly updates on that project. We don't do that for any other project, and there is a considerable administrative workload that goes into that. So it's about using the formal mechanisms that are in place and providing those updates at that level that's appropriate for council, the elected body, being the strategic level and not the day-to-day operational level of this staff member did this and we met with this business and we chatted to Alexandrina and we did this and that. That's certainly not the level of reporting that's practical for reporting these projects to elected members and indeed our community.
Thank you, Acting CEO. Is there any further discussion to this item? If not, Councillor Henderson, you moved it. Would you like to close debate? No. I put that motion to the vote. All those in favour of recommendation 6 and those against, that motion is carried. We move on.
Quarter division.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp.
Keep it
Thought you were a
going.
bit slow off the mark there. All those in favour, please stand. For the motion were Councillor Mann, Councillor Littley, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Schofield, are you in favour of this motion?
I do.
Thank you. And Councillor Henderson. Those against, Councillor Kemp and Councillor Robertson. That motion is carried. That leaves recommendation 7. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson moving that way. Would someone like to second that? Thank you, Councillor Littley. Would either of you like to speak to that motion? If not, would anyone like to speak to that motion? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I would like to speak to this motion here because this customer service business that they're too making sure that council members direct customers to the customer service channels and directing council members' requests through the administration. I found the explanation in the on page 34 here to be a little bit unfortunate. Myself, I'm one of the few councillors on this council that follows up with people that have issues with the council.
Point of order.
Thank you, Councillor.
It was called on me earlier. Point of order. Come.
I think the broad generality of the statement is unappreciated by your fellow elected members. Councillor Robertson, please continue in a way that
Okay, sure.
ensures harmony.
Okay, I'm one of the people that one of the councils that follows up.
Point of order. That's a repeat of the statement.
Councillor Littley, let's please.
Back on the chain.
Hang on a second.
Sorry.
You're not on the farm now, Andrew. Point of order. That was a repeat of the statement that you just asked him not to say. He's just.
It wasn't. You're dreaming.
Oh, you could.
Councillor Littley, Councillor Robertson.
Littley, come on.
Let's try and have some decorum. We may only be here for a couple more months, but let's not be at each other's throats for that. Councillor Robertson.
Yep.
Please, without referring
wherever
to
I get whenever I get requests from people to follow up on issues related to the council, that's residents, ratepayers. I do my best to make sure that they actually use the council customer service, but many of them come to me on the basis that they've already tried to do that and they haven't succeeded. So that's when they get round to writing to me. So to take something up. So this the business here where we have that the, that we should be doing more of that. I already do that. I only send follow up with people when they haven't had a going to customer service. So, I mean, I don't see the point of this thing at all.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. It doesn't sound like you'll be affected by the implementation of this motion, so that's a good thing if you're already doing that practice. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? Pleased in a civilised manner. Councillor Glasbrook, thank you.
I'll support this one. I've not had any problem. I've quite often rang up customer service on behalf of the constituent who's spoken to me, and found them always to be very good, and they've always sent me an email and tracking number and everything. So I think that this is just a process that we should be adopting. Yeah. So.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Kent.
It's interesting from what I've heard on the subject that we're all doing this anyway. So why do we need this recommendation if we're doing it? It's just all you're doing is confirming what we're doing. It's a nonsensical recommendation. So I don't know why it's here. Unless staff want to open up and give us a reason why they want this here, because the named councillors who are not doing it.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I think, as you're often a fan of having very set procedures and policies in place, this is just a way of making sure elected members are aware of the channels through which communications will be dealt with, which gives clarity and helps elected members perform their duties. Discussion, debate. If not, Councillor Henderson, in closing, no. I put recommendation 7 to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried. Which leads us to Councillor Kemp. You foreshadowed.
I did shadow a motion, Deputy Mayor. Again, this is in the light of trying to reduce workload for senior management team and the ongoing effects down the chain of command. My motion: the CEO's Performance Committee convenes a meeting with CEO McCurdy as soon as possible to discuss a temporary replacement for her until she can return to work full time. The reason why I've moved this motion is because I believe part of the impact by not having our CEO here due to her illness has impacted on the senior staff by taking on multiple roles, which has impacted on their managers below them who's taken on multiple roles. And I see it had a cascading effect by having a temporary replacement of a CEO who has experience in local government, would have been a great source. Now, when our original CEO first went on sick leave, it was only a short term, but it has proven to be longer term. And we all feel for her, but I think, to alleviate some of the stress and levels that our senior management team are telling us, I think we should alleviate them of that pressure by putting a temporary CEO in place, by having this conversation with the CEO through the CEO's Performance Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Just in relation to the motion that you're proposing, the motion itself would require revocation of a current delegation given to the CEO in terms of appointing the acting position. Also, your motion definitely suggests that we're providing a direction to a CEO that is on personal leave. So in directing a staff member that is on leave. For those reasons, I think if you had the time to think about this motion and print it out, you probably had the time to find this information out for yourself and have those discussions as well. And so I won't be accepting the motion. Councillor Kemp.
Just a reply response. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your decision on this. I suppose, again, I only thought of it today. It's not one of those situations I did write to the acting CEO about this a few months ago, and she gave a response back, and I accepted that. Again, I just felt that it's an opportune time to look at to try and support the senior management team under this agenda item and to show some leadership by trying to alleviate their stresses and that. This is not about directing the current CEO, Mrs. McCurdy, to attend the meeting. We're asking her, would she attend to have a discussion through the CEO Performance Review Committee. So that's all it was. So I just think that, you know, your answer wasn't quite, in my terms, correct in what I was trying to achieve.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp, and I appreciate the disagreement. Councillor Schofield, are you proposing a motion in this space? Or?
No, Deputy Mayor, but may I make a statement, please, in relation to what's just been said?
I don't think it's necessary, Councillor Schofield.
Okay.
In relation to what Councillor Kemp has discussed and myself.
I think it was inappropriate.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. I believe Councillor Robertson has also provided a motion. Would you like me to read it out, Councillor Robertson? The motion that he's foreshadowed with administration this evening is council reduce its project workload by at least 2 million of capital expenditure for 22-23. As the report item that we are in is 9.4 risk management strategic review of service levels, I don't believe that this motion is in keeping with the topic at hand, and I don't believe that this is the right part of the agenda for it to sit in. I would also suggest that because your motion is a budgetary one, it's probably one that does need some reporting to go with it and should be a motion on notice. You're more than welcome to try and put it in motions without notice, but I probably won't accept it.
I make a response to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. In looking at the, I really do appreciate the problem that the staff have of this council. Really do. Looking at what can be done to help out. And to me, one of the items here, of all the items we had here, the 7 items we had here, didn't really address the basic problem. And that is increasingly as staff are bled from out of the organisation, we are faced with a situation of fewer people to do the same number of jobs. That we need to reduce our workload, take the pressure off the budget and off the people that are concerned. That to me is the most sensible way of dealing with a situation that's only going to get tougher.
Absolutely.
So to me, it was that an attempt to say, because I heard at the audit committee meeting today, that the council was very, very happy to have this $16.5 million that we all wanted, $16.5 million of capital expenditure.
Councillor Robertson, this does seem to be bleeding into debate here. I'm not accepting the motion. I totally understand the intent behind it. I'm just saying that in trying to lead in this area and trying to help reduce the burden on administration, we need to be working with them and not, I guess, deciding what we think is best for them, and also giving your elected member colleagues the respect of being able to consider these things beforehand, especially given we are 1.5 months out from our budget that we just adopted, and to make a budgetary change of capital of $2 million, fairly significant, and therefore is something that should be dealt with through way of a report. Okay, so is there any other motions in relation to 9.4? If not, we will move on to 9.5. 9.5 is the 2022-23 capital budget adjustment. There is 2 recommendations. One is to receive a note and the other is the changes in our capital budget as per the list. Councillor Henderson.
I'd like to move them on block.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Schofield. Would either of you like to speak to this motion? No? Would anyone like to speak to this motion? Councillor Robertson.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I would agree to this motion if we took out all but the arts and culture increased expenditure. I think that this is another one of those issues. It's an action item. It requires a lot of work to go with it. It's an increase in the capital budget again. And to me, we could definitely put off those purchases of the equipment for another year.
Thank you, councillor Robertson. Is there any other further discussion? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just have a question. These plant equipment, how old are they? First question. Second question is there a lot of maintenance and repairs on these pieces of equipment that they need actually replacing? And I do have a couple other questions. I'll just those two first. Thanks.
Thank you, councillor Kemp. Acting Director Knight Stacey.
Thank you, through the chair. So the equipment that's in the list were actually included in last year's budget, and they've been ordered. They just, because of delays, they haven't been delivered on time to be capitalised with last year's budget. So council has already made a commitment through purchase orders or through a contract process to go ahead with these. They just haven't got here in time by the 30th of June. And so they were already on the plant replacement register within the asset management plans and long-term financial plan.
Thank you, Acting Director Kelly. Follow-up questions on that. With the shortage of trucks and demand for vehicles of this type in Australia at the moment, we can get out of this contract if we wanted to, because I would think that the resale value or the value of those trucks could be sold off very quickly by the dealer. And is it true that we do get a bit of a discount because we buy through a dealer all the time? So would it not be prudent to hold off for if we can break the contract and due to we don't require them because our vehicles are good, we could then wait another 12 months or 2 years and then maybe get them at a cheaper price again?
Through the chair, in terms of breaking a contract, would come with its own challenges. It depends on how lenient the person the company that we were purchasing them from. I wouldn't think that it would be a good position to put council in terms of reputation and future purchases. You know, definitely it is something that we could look into, but these vehicles were on the list and had been deferred a number of years in previous budgets before they got to this point where we did actually need to go ahead with the purchase. So I don't know, Kathy might be able to add some additional, but essentially they had already been deferred a number of years before being placed into the budget.
So my question, original one, how many years old are these vehicles?
I couldn't answer that off the top of my head, sorry.
Okay. And just a bit more clarity around the additional costs involved as to why they're more expensive. Sorry, my apologies for interrupting you. If we bought these, we've already ordered them over 12 months ago, didn't we have a lock-in price? So why they've gone up so much?
Through the chair, so these are the amounts that were included in the last year's budget. So they haven't actually gone up, they've just had to be carried forward a year because we didn't actually expend the money or receive the goods or get an invoice by the 30th of June. So we're carrying, basically taking the budget that we had last year and moving it into 22-23 because we can't recognise the asset until we get it and pay for it.
Still got a few minutes left. Well, I'm still trying to understand why it wasn't carried over as part of the capital WIP project, you know, and now it's coming here. Look, to me, it sounds like an additional $250,000 we're asking for, where it should have come across with the WIP project, I would have thought.
So through the chair, it was late items. We were expecting to have received them either on the 30th of June or a few days after, with the invoice dated the 30th of June. So we were hopeful in receiving those and unaware that they had actually been delayed and weren't in the country ready for delivery to us. And so it's not additional money, it's a movement of the budgets from year to year.
Councillor Lilley.
Yeah, just wondering through the chair there, if you could quantify the efficiencies gained that would be Fantastic. Gain from getting this new equipment. No doubt when we get new equipment, we are a bit more, have a more efficient workforce. Or if only that you can confirm that they would create efficiencies, that'll be okay too.
Director Hayter.
Thank you through the chair. I'm not off the top of my head, couldn't go through each of these line by line, but I would say they will create efficiencies certainly in terms of maintenance requirements and availability. So yes, I would support, I mean, we have them on a replacement schedule that is based on optimum replacement. So some of them would be many years old and be past their kilometres for optimal replacement. So they need replacement. They're not things that we just do just because they are on a schedule and that has some evidence and some rationale behind.
Can I speak to that now?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll be supporting this primarily on that basis that, you know, we're talking about efficiencies for our staff and helping our staff who are undermanned and up against it to be more efficient. And here's equipment that's been wanting and carried over. It's not new money, it's carried over. I can't understand why we'd even look at not helping our staff to become more efficient with the equipment that they need.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Henderson in close. I put recommendations 1 and 2 to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. We move on to item 9.6, which is Happy FM sponsorship proposal. We have the receiver note, and then we have A, B or C in the recommendations. I'll be going to the chamber as to how you'd like to deal with this. Councillor Robertson. You can, you just need to select A, B or C because they're or options. A? Okay, so Councillor Robertson. Happy FM, noting that future marketing requirements will be undertaken in line with organisational requirements of the Council's procurement policy. Can you please turn your microphone on, Councillor Robertson? Sorry, your microphone.
Right, yep. Could I vary the 2A where
Yep.
it says one-off donation, replace that with an annual promotion of events?
So that Council provides an annual promotion of events to Happy FM?
Yep. Not a one-off, but a contract for.
I understand what you're trying to say. You're trying
Yep.
to say that this is a recurring sponsorship. Just the wording you've chosen is not, doesn't entirely say that.
Yeah.
So the council provides an annual donation to Happy FM, but then the second half of it is superfluous.
Well, I wasn't thinking of a donation. I was thinking of it being an actual expenditure on promotion of our events. I'm not explaining it very well. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
To be worked for, not to be given a handout.
Yeah, I think 2B is definitely. I think
Fee
2B
for
is the
service.
one you want. So if we go with 2B but remove for a period of 12 months off the end of it, you'll have that council supports the Happy FM sponsorship proposal at a cost of $1,440 plus $30 per change of script on a fee for service basis.
Yep, okay, all right.
That's what you
The
want to do?
wording's too difficult, okay.
Yeah.
Yep, suit 2B.
Okay, Councillor Robertson is moving recommendation 1 and 2B minus or ending it after the word basis. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Little is seconding that. Would either of you like to speak to this? Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think that as was put in the note from Happy FM, they in fact do a lot of promotional work for the council in many ways, and including not only over the radio, but also in terms of some are over their website as well. And they're a community not-for-profit, and they do a great job. And that, we certainly need to have some assistance in terms of promotion of our events. And the radio is a great way to do that. So thinking of what they could do for us in terms of providing a benefit to the council, providing a backup on radio to what the work that we do elsewhere would be really worthwhile. For $1,400 a year, great value.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Lilley, would you like to speak to this?
I just support it. I think that Happy FM do a great job of spreading the news right across the community, including our council news and plenty of other community news. So I support that.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson.
My feeling is that this application could sit in an application for community grants program. So my question is to Director Pathouse. Does it sit within those guidelines? And if not, why not?
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Director Pathouse.
Through the chair, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I'd have to look at the community grants program and the criteria, and so the best I could do at the moment is take that on notice.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Can I comment based on the reply?
Yeah.
In that case, I will not support this. I'd rather have the information as to whether it fits within those guidelines, because we have many community groups applying for funding to this council, and if they all come in ad hoc in this manner, then we don't know where we are budget-wise. We have various allocations or guidelines for different groups of types of grants. Community grants is one, arts and culture grants are another, etc., sports and recreation. If this fits within those guidelines, I would rather see this sort of application come in with all of the others for a community grant.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Glasbrook.
Just before we go on,
Yes, Councillor.
based on
Lilley.
that, I might withdraw my seconding of that because it makes a great deal of sense.
Okay, Councillor Lilley has withdrawn his seconding of the motion. Is there someone that would like to replace the name? Thank you, Councillor Mann. Now seconding the motion. Sorry, Councillor Glasbrook, as Councillor Mann has now seconded the motion, I'll give him the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I appreciate the views expressed by Councillor Henderson. I think personally I see this as a bit different to your standard community grants, even without getting that reply from administration. This is more that, as it's been expressed, fee for service. And I think because of that nature of it as well, I think I'm happy to support this through this kind of forum, as opposed to this being put against community grants, which don't as often give as a direct benefit to council, more the community as a whole. So I think it might be a bit more difficult to stack those up against the grants. So I'll support this one.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Glasbrook.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I won't. I think we should treat this radio station and the other community radio station that we have the same way that we treat our local print media, and that when we go out for our consultations and our whatever, that we include them in the list of advertisers and support them in that way. So I don't think, I won't support it.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll move to adjourn this motion until the new council is formed for further discussions. The reason why I moved the adjournment motion is that, as Councillor Glasbrook has raised, that we have two community radio stations all manned by volunteers. They all do a great job for our community. And one of the things I think that we are very weak on in this council, any council that is, we don't market ourselves very well. And one of the best ways of getting to the community is through radio. And I think if this proposal gets up, I think we should include both radio stations in some type of fee-for-service package who can deliver messages, about the council, what to do, consultations, etc., etc. So I think, why this is a great concept, and I'm not against it. I just think we should think a bit more through it and maybe the new council can look at, well, with some timeframes to give staff opportunity to put a report together to look at how they could do a marketing package, fee for service, and what type of messages they want to send out through the 2 radio stations.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Would someone like to second the motion to adjourn? If not, the formal motion lapses due to lack of a seconder, and we return to the motion at hand. Is there any further discussion of the motion? If not, Councillor Robertson, you moved the motion. Would you like to close debate? No. I will put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That motion fails, is lost. A new motion. Yes. Yeah. Councillor Glasbrook, would you like to move something in lieu of
I'd be
this?
happy to move something in the line of what I just suggested, that when council has its statutory requirements for going out to local media outlets, we include our 2 local radio stations. Something simple like that.
Okay.
Can I just jump in here and declare a perceived conflict of interest, given that there's been more than 1 radio station mentioned, and those being community radio stations, and I am involved as a journalist on a radio station, which is a commercial radio station. I have a conflict of interest, I believe, and I now have a conflict of interest, I believe, and I'll be leaving the chamber and return once the vote is done.
Thank you, Councillor Lidley. Don't forget to pick up a form on your way out, or you'll get on the way back in. Beautiful. We'll just wait for all of the writing to be done in relation to this. We just had to capture the conflict of interest. Now we'll get to the motion. So Councillor Glasbrook, that reads that council utilises local radio stations and other media outlets as part of statutory consultation processes on a fee-for-service basis. Does that say what you want to say?
Yeah, I suppose it doesn't specify just the 2 local community, whether that's people find that specific or whether we should be including all radio stations, I'm not sure. So just the 2 stations there.
Through the chair, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question, Councillor Glasbrook. Is it your intention that we amend the council's community engagement policy to actually specify that we will utilise local radio for statutory engagements, or is it just that we will consider use of them in amongst the suite of other media options that we might have, and that we would, in line with procurement requirements and the like, apply it on a fee-for-service basis as opposed to a sponsorship proposal? Are you sort of saying it's a we will, because then it's sort of a policy amendment? Otherwise, it's sort of, yeah, I'm just trying to capture what you're after.
Well, I'd be happy for a policy amendment, but I'm open to what the other members feel. I suppose I just have to move it and see what happens.
Yeah, the policy amendment would require probably more than this.
Is that another huge workload? Am I just creating another huge job?
I think
probably. I'm happy with the recommendation.
You're happy with the recommendation?
I'm happy with the recommendation you had there.
We're good. Council utilises local radio stations and other media outlets as part of statutory consultation processes on a fee-for-service basis. We will use local radio where required and pay a service fee. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Robertson, happy to second that? Yep. Sorry.
Yeah. So you just to second that
Correct.
Yeah, no, I was going to speak to it, but not second it.
Okay. Yeah, no, we're looking for a seconder first. Would any other elected member like to second this motion? Councillor Mann, obliging.
I would second it. I don't know whether I'd suggest a variation of just taking out statutory, so then it's considers not just statutory consultation, but other consultation we go out for as well. Yeah,
Beautiful.
he's happy with that.
Now, Councillor Glasbrook, did you want to speak to this motion? No. Councillor Mann? Councillor Robertson, you can speak to the motion.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we've lost a little bit the spirit of what this, how this item came up on the agenda. I'm not sure where it came from, but it's in response to a letter from Happy FM pointing out all the free inputs that the radio station gives, the in-kind inputs the radio station gives the City of Victor Harbor, particularly its senior leadership. And I guess they're looking for a little bit more than just use of their time and effort. And I don't think that what we're capturing here is the spirit of that, you know, in terms of what can we give back to them in terms of, to me, it's something where we desperately need to improve our performances in event promotion and marketing. And so to me, that's it's what the radio station would do very well. And but we're off in the weeds, and in terms of the of what we're going to put on offer. We've voted against having a sponsorship proposal, and now what are we doing? That's just a statement that we utilise radio. We certainly do use them as part of consultation processes on a fee-for-service basis. Well, that's not entirely true, because we take a lot from this particular radio station as a free service, and we're happy to take it. Over nearly $100,000 worth if we had to pay for it.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Is there any further discussion of this item? Councillor Kemp?
Yeah, I just wanted to declare a perceived conflict of interest, as I have a guest spot on Fleurieu FM once a week for approximately an hour, so I'll stay in the chamber and discuss it as I gain no benefit from this decision.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Further discussion? If not, Councillor Glasbrook? No. I'll wait for Councillor Kemp to return to his seat, and then we'll put this motion to a vote. So the motion is that Council utilises local radio stations and other media outlets as part of consultation processes on a fee-for-service basis. All those in favour of this motion? And those against? Carried. Thank you.
Well,
we will invite Councillor Little.
Can I call a division, please?
Yeah, we can call a division. All those in favour of the motion, please stand. Those for, Councillor Mann, Councillor Glasbrook, Councillor Kemp, Councillor Henderson. Those against, Councillor Robertson and Councillor Schofield. You're against, just confirming with your voice, please.
I am against
Thank
this
you.
motion.
So that motion is still carried. We'll invite Councillor Little back into the chamber. We have gone past 8 o'clock, which means that we are due for a break. We'll go on hold for 10 minutes and return after that. Thank you. Recommendations there. I'll be guided by you guys how you'd like to deal with them. Not everyone at once, please. Thank you, Councillor Henderson. What are you moving just one or 1 and 2? Both, thank you.
Sorry, both en bloc.
Thank you. And seconding is Councillor Schofield. Would either of you like to speak to these? No, would anyone like to speak to these? Councillor Robertson.
Just a quick question, Chair. Why are we doing this when we haven't got any annual financial statements? Is this something we have to authorise to give this job to someone to do that can't be done at a later stage, or has to be done now, or why?
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Acting CEO. Or sorry, Acting Director. Knight Stacey.
Thank you, through the chair. So we do this each year. This particular report comes to council every year. The Act requires the CEO and the Mayor to be able to certify the statements, but they have to have been authorised by council to do it. So this is just asking for council to give the authorisation to the Mayor and CEO to sign once they're ready. It's come a little bit earlier this year because of caretaker.
Thank you, Acting Director. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We move on. The next item would have been 10.1, but we that. So we move on to 10.2, City Activation Strategic Planning Advisory Committee Performance Report. It's just that we receive and note the report. Councillor Mann moving that way. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Henderson, thank you. Would either of you like to speak to this? Would anyone like to speak to this? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. We will move on now to 11.1, Corporate and Community Services 2022 Office Closures and End of Year Function. There are 4 recommendations there, be guided by Councillor Mann.
Happy to move them en bloc.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson seconding those. Would either of you like to speak to these?
I'd just say that it'd be nice in recognition of the very difficult few years we've had to give our staff a bit more time off over the Christmas break, but I think the community is too dependent on that, so I'm happy to support as it is.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Robertson, did you want to speak to it? No. Is there any further discussion in relation to this matter? If not, we'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Move on to 11.2, Temporary Community Event Sign Request, Port Elliot Show. These next 3 are a prime example of where delegations can probably reduce some of the burden on preparing these reports as well as time in the meetings. So let's fly through it maybe. There's 2 recommendations there, be guided by you guys. Would someone like to move them together? Councillor Schofield? Yep. Thank you. Someone to second that? Councillor Henderson. Would either of you like to speak? Would anyone like to speak? Councillor Robertson.
Chair, I just have a request about this in the sense that can I just ask, I guess it's Director Pathouse, but maybe not, through the chair, there are quite a number of signs that are coming up and there is supposed to be limits on the number of signs. Is this the process that he's gone through, particularly with regard to electronic signs? I've seen a lot of them coming up in the town, and I'm just wondering if these ones are also subject to the general provisions of the signage that we have.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Acting Director Knight Stacey for this one too.
Thank you, through the chair. So most of the event signage guidelines basically have a number of sites around council that community groups can use to advertise their events. We have a register of all of those and a full calendar. It doesn't necessarily apply in regards to these couple of reports that have come up to electronic signage. That may come under another area, but this is more around those banners and just those event advertising.
Thank you, Acting Director. Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Schofield, close debate. No, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's carried. We move on to 11.3, temporary community event sign request, Port Elliot Toy Fair. Would someone like to move recommendations 1 and 2? Councillor Henderson moving that way and Councillor Mann seconding. Would either of you like to speak? Would anyone like to speak? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? We move on to 11.4, temporary community sign event sign request, Fluoro Psychic. There are 2 recommendations. Someone like to move those? Thank you, Councillor Scove. Someone like to second that? Thank you, Councillor Littley. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to that? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Sure. 12.1, under Environment and Infrastructure Services, investigation for roundabout at Hindmarsh Road and Wattle Drive intersection. There is 4 recommendations there. I'll be guided by you guys how you'd like to handle those. Councillor Henderson.
I'll move all 4 on block.
Thank you. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Robertson, thank you very much. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Henderson? Councillor Robertson, would you like to speak?
Yes, thanks, thanks, Chair. I guess the thing that most, I think this is absolutely a great proposal, and but I'm concerned that it's huge cost, $7.8 million, and why does this particular design, take up so much space so that it's actually requiring us to spend, a lot of money, and I think it's a considerable underestimate, buying land off various landowners. And I looked at this and I was thinking, well, the plans showing, I thought, oh, well, there's so many plans here, there'll definitely one where there'll be a small, medium and large scale roundabout. There wasn't. There's only one size roundabout and it's a monster. And I'm just thinking back to the Crozier Road roundabout. I think that one cost the state government, I think $1.5 million. And I was thinking that was going to be the sort of roundabout that we would get for this extremely important proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Are you seeking a response in relation to that?
Sorry?
Are you seeking a response in relation to?
Yes. Yeah, I would like to understand why we ended up with such a carbuncle on the map.
Carbuncle.
You see it in space.
Director Hayter.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm not sure what that word means, but I'll hazard a guess. So the design and the recommendation there is from DIT. So it's DIT's design as to what they think would be the most appropriate in that location.
Wow.
Councillor Glasbrook.
Well, I'll be speaking against it and voting against it. I think the last thing we need at the bottom of that hill is another roundabout. That's my opinion. I know the short term they've got some turning lanes which may help, but the long term roundabout, I think the answer to the problem there is to give people an alternative way of getting out of that area. Another roundabout in the way. And there are options to get people out of there without going onto Hindmarsh Road.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would like, under recommendation 3, for noting if the senior management team could put under the strategic register any alternative solutions in the area, not so much putting roundabouts on Hindmarsh Road, but maybe potentially looking at bridges across the Hindmarsh River at certain points to connect up you know, in the back streets there to alleviate that problem of cars moving around, just to have it on the strategic register for alternative solutions. It may not be, but at least it would be looking at a wider scope. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess, yeah, just raise that point that's been said about the size of the roundabout. And I know I appreciate that that's what DIT has suggested, but it's also comes with a whopping great price tag that won't be very competitive against other projects when compared statewide, and not in terms of something that council would want to deliver on itself. So I guess my hesitation about we've tried the roundabout idea, let's move on. I'm not necessarily in favour of that, and whether I guess you know, we can get that more understanding from DIT as to why a smaller roundabout couldn't be that option at a much lower price tag or somewhere else along there. And I guess there's probably engineering reasons and traffic management flow reasons, and that's probably what they'll say. So yeah, I'm not sure how much more we can do as a council to benefit our community in that area as well.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Schofield.
Thank you. Look, I agree with Councillor Kemp that there must be other options, and I'm thinking $7 million, it's going to involve removing bus stops and everything else. I honestly believe that a bridge over the river that connects with the round ring road would be the ideal solution for all of the people that live in that area, not just the few in that small area. And I think that's an option that we should be considering or looking at. But at this particular stage, I'd like to consider a few other things as well.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Is there any further?
I just want to say that anyone who knows anything about traffic movement knows that roundabouts are a very efficient way of keeping the traffic flowing, because there is always something moving on a roundabout, and the larger the roundabout, the more enhanced that traffic movement is. There is less stopping and starting. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Brooke. Let's stay within our meeting procedures. It makes 3 of you tonight. With that, we put the motion to a vote. That's recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 4. And those against? Against? Yep. That motion is lost. I'll call for a division on, please. All those in favour, please stand. Those for, Councillor Mann, Councillor Kemp, and Councillor Henderson. Those against, Councillor Lidley, Councillor Robertson, sorry, Councillor Gladsbrook, Councillor Robertson, and Councillor Schofield, just confirming that you were against that.
I'm against that motion.
Thank you very much. That motion is lost. We move on to item 12.2, Flinders Parade and Esplanade Pedestrian Crossing Investigation. There are 2 recommendations in front of us. I'll be guided by you as to how you would like to deal with them. Would anyone like to move either or both recommendations? Councillor Schofield, which option?
I'd like to move them en bloc, please.
Thank you. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Henderson, thank you very much. Would either of you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Schofield?
Thank you. I think this is long overdue. I've actually seen some very, very close calls, especially just down in front of the cafe. One of the issues, I believe, is in an area where the tram crosses, there are pavers in the road. Now, those pavers, I believe, are misinforming people that it is a pedestrian crossing. Still needs to be something done. Some of the horse tram staff have nearly been connected by a car, and so this is good. It's a good start. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Councillor Henderson.
Yes, with increasing traffic in our town, I think it's time that we have some safe crossing points in this area, and I think the two places recommended are very logical.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Lidley.
I absolutely agree with this crossing as it's outlined here and taking those steps, but I did want to just come back to the topic of Grantley Avenue. With respect to this crossing, we're talking about pedestrian safety through this area, and the idea of Grantley Avenue being closed off to right-hand turns from this side of the town would force or would result in quite a few trailered vehicles being taken through this very area that we're trying to improve pedestrian safety through our highest pedestrian activity area, because it's the only way of really getting down into that sailing club from there. So I'm saying it has a flow-on effect. So if we're doing this, just keep in mind that we're doing this for a reason. We don't want to create another problem somewhere else that puts more pressure on this pedestrian crossing area that I will support.
Thank you, Councillor Lidley. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Glasbrook.
Well, I won't be supporting it. It's not that I don't think that there is a need there, but I'm not sure it's quite as urgent as it appears to be here. You know, we've got so many things in process that we haven't done, and now here we're just going to start thinking about another one. And you know, that what does it say? That having considered all options, council endorse progressing to concept design. Well, we've got so many things in concept design that haven't been done. The last thing we need is another one. I think this should be put onto our long-term plan and been discussed with all of the other projects that haven't been done over the last 8 years that I've been on council. So I'm not in favour of it.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess I'll start with a question. Do we have any stats on how many pedestrians have been hit by cars crossing these roads to warrant certain actions for this? I'm not against safety. I'm not again. I understand where Councillor Lidley came from about he's right in the context that, you know, if we close off Grantley Avenue to certain traffic flow, that will further encompass down to Eyre Terrace and further maybe down to the Esplanade. So from that report of how many, that's why you put these solutions in place, because there is a high risk there. But we don't have stats on that at the moment. I'm not quite sure. We talk about not loading up our staff. We spoke about a lot of workload that staff are under. Here we are trying to put more workload onto them. We should be reducing it, not increasing it. I think because this has been a problem for many years and we don't have stats on injuries, whereas the high spot area, as they call it, this could be deferred for at least a few more months until we get staff back, up increasing the workload again for staff to achieve what we want to achieve. So I think at the moment, I'm more considerate about the staff safety and welfare with the workload more so than at the moment that people are not getting knocked over like 10 pins every day down there. So I think people can manage themselves across the roads, but it's something that needs to be done in the future, I think, when the time's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. If I can draw your attention to page 96, which is page 3 of the attached report, it does have crash data for the area spoken about. for the past 5 years. It says that no data was recorded for the past 5 years for those exact areas, but there was one incident which resulted in a minor injury.
Thank you for pointing that out to me. I did miss that in my quick read over 5 days.
That's okay. Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Schofield, closing.
I will. Thank you. Just listening to Councillor Kemp, staff safety and workload on staff aren't just here within this building. The staff at the horse tram are our responsibility as well. I have been down there. It is supposed to be a 25 limit and the cars whiz around there, some doing 50. The signs at the moment that are put by the workmen are actually telling people while they're still in the 25 limit that they can do 50. And, you know, really it is quite unsafe. There would be thousands of people that walk there. At the weekends, there would be 2,000 or 3,000, even this time of the year, that cross that road. And all of a sudden there's pushers, walkers being pushed out onto traffic that's running fairly well over the speed limit. So I think that this should be considered as a safety to our staff, our community and the visitors that come to Victor Harbor and our horses.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Councillor Kemp. Councillor Schofield was closing debate.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask a question about whose staff it is. I thought it was the authority staff, not council.
If it was a question, the time has passed, so thank you. We'll put those motions to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That motion's carried.
Call it a division.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All those in favour, please stand. Those for, Councillor Mann. Councillor Lidley.
I am voting for the motion.
You're in favour, thank you. And Councillor Henderson. Those against? Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Kemp. And Councillor Robertson. That motion is carried. We're all getting our exercise tonight. We move on to item 12.3, which is the Rec and Sport Grants 22-23 individual grants. There is 3 recommendations there for you. I'll be guided by you as to how you wish to deal with them. Councillor Lidley.
I'll put them all on block.
Thank you very much. Someone like to second that? Councillor Henderson. Would either of you like to speak to that motion? Councillor Lidley.
Yeah, just to say that all 3 in there are very worthy applicants, and they're endorsed as such, and I hope that the council supports them. It's some great programs in there, and one very good individual athlete who's going to go off and represent us quite well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lidley. Councillor Henderson, would you like to speak? No. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree. All 3 applicants, and I presume there were only 3 of them, have been awarded some funds out of the grants out of this, but and they, in their own way, they're all deserving of it. Although I would just think that we need a better mousetrap to be able to take care of the grants given to those people that are on the staff of the council. I think it's not, they thoroughly deserve it. I'll say that again. And I'll vote for this, but I think that it's not a good look for us to be having a committee which is composed of council people, whether they be elected members or staff, handing out grants, and they're going to council staff. And to me, we need to find for the person here that's taking the grant for a leadership course, absolutely, we should have within the training program of the council, some budget for those people that want to take part in that kind of training. That's what I hope will come out of the whole business of the corporate software program, giving people opportunities to have training where they'd like to go. But I think it's really something we shouldn't be doing again, that we shouldn't be having this committee handing out what is a relatively small amount of money, a huge exposure to say, why are we doing this for the council staff? And I think we, as a council, need to make sure that that sort of arrangements which we put in place, for instance, council staff that go to Adelaide for training on various issues related to their work, admittedly, but we also ought to find a way to be able to take care of those people that are elite athletes in the council. There's opportunities that come up for them to attend events and stuff like that. If we feel that way, we should be taking that out of a different pot of money. I just don't think this is a good look.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I certainly take on board the sentiment of your concerns there. I would say in relation to this matter, these staff members are also players of the City of Victor Harbor and therefore shouldn't be either gaining an advantage or at a disadvantage just because they work for the City of Victor Harbor. It's gone through the same process that every other application has gone through. So I think that the most fair, transparent way of dealing the same deal to all City of Victor Harbor residents. Is there further discussion in relation to this matter? Councillor Littley, closing debate.
I am closing debate. I get the look, Andrew. I do. I see where you're coming from. But knowing the individuals from a sporting perspective and from a participation perspective, my wife and I have worked very hard to engage young women into football and also through junior tennis as well, youngsters there. To have the calibre of people like Deb Beaton and Emma Craft put their hand up to be leaders and encourage our youngsters, our youth in this community to stay involved in sport, build teams. Emma Craft has gone for a leadership program. These ladies, in their own rights, they give a great deal of time over and above anything that they do for this council to these sports. As the Deputy Mayor said, they have earned these grants on their own merits. They've gone through the same process. I think it would send a really, really bad message to our broader community if we were to knock on the head people who are putting up and wanting to go out there and lead by example, such as people like these staff members that we have. So I get that you see it and some may see it as a bad look for the council to be giving grant money to council employees, but they all have families, they all participate in teams, they have teammates, they lead teams. It would be a very, very bad look if we weren't to support this kind of thing, because this is exactly what these recreation and sports grants are meant to be achieving and meant to be drawing in. This is an example of what we want from other people in our community. Our staff are doing the right thing here and really selling this grants program for good results. I hope we all support it.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. With that, Councillor
Deputy
Robertson,
Mayor,
that was closing debate. So unless it's a procedural issue, there's no more questions, no more discussion. Thank you. With that, debate is closed and we will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We move on to 12.4, which is the Bluff Master Plan, Draft Master Plan and Phase 2 consultation. And 3 recommendations there. I'll be guided by you as to how you'd like to deal with them. Councillor Schofield.
Yes, I'd like to move those en bloc, please.
Thank you. Someone like to second that? Councillor Henderson, thank you very much. Would either of you like to speak to that? No, no. Would anyone like to speak to this motion? Councillor Kemp.
Just a question, thank you, Deputy Mayor. How much staff are involved in this process, or is just the consultant doing the public consultation?
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Director Hayter.
2 staff are involved in this, with Corey, who's obviously leading it, but we have 2 staff supporting.
Thank you for that. To me, this is not high priority. I know we started the process, but this has been a long process. I've been looking for a while. I was just wondering now that with the workload that our staff are facing, that should we not put this on hold for a time being to actually, that's why I won't support it. I think until we get back to some normality with staffing, this is not a high priority. It can be another 3 months, 6 months before we do the second phase of this. So I just feel that it's, we should be looking at that aspect of it. Things do change, and sometimes we have to adapt to the change, and we need to sometimes make these decisions. And I think Corey, depends on, I think he will be understanding of the situation. Well, everyone else has to be understanding. I think Corey could be as well, of our situation with staffing issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Glasbrook.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually sort of agree with Councillor Kemp, although we probably need to continue on now that we've gone through this process. Got to this stage, I mean, I'm very excited about this. Was it Fetch or something? What they've done is, fantastic. I'm very, very excited about it, very pleased with it. But this is a long-term project. This is a really long-term project. And if we've got our staff, that are so busy that they, can't write reports for council and can't do this and can't do that, well, this is not a priority because it is such a long-term program, but probably can't get out of it at the moment because we've got a contract or something. But I don't know. These are the things that can be cut out if we're so busy.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Just in relation to your comments around contracts, Director Hayter, can you provide some clarity, please?
Thank you. We do have a contract in place. That said, you may recall that originally we had a timeline that had us presenting the final master plan to council next week. Based on a discussion with all of you at a workshop, we elongated that timeline for this one and for the precinct to take into account our staffing situation. So in fact, this one is now been taken out to March next year, and that was, we at that time worked with our consultant who kindly agreed, despite the contract that we had with him, he kindly agreed to extend it by 6 months. So we've already asked, and those 2 staff that are working, sorry, I should have said they're not full-time, they are part-time in support of Corey, not working on it full-time, but we have extended it by some 6 months to take that into account.
Is there further discussion on this item? Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. In terms of ILM, I'm glad to see that there have been some boat trailer parking added to the plans. I'm not sure, I know it's pretty small, I don't know whether you have a figure or whether the amount of car parks that it adds, or whether they...
Sorry, through the chair, no, I don't, but I can take that on notice.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I guess there's an amount there along the road, and that, I guess my only feedback would be here every year is around whether there is provision for more. It'd be interesting to see whether the boating community say that they would like more in this draft plan. Do the consultation. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Schofield, would you like to close debate? No? We'll put recommendations 1, 2 and 3 to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried. With that, we have already 13.5, which means we are now at 13.1. The Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee minutes of the 4th of August 2022. Councillor Mann, you would like to move all three of those? Yep. And Councillor Henderson seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? No? Would anyone like to speak to that? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We move on to 13.2, which is City Activation and Strategic Advisory Committee minutes 9th of August 2022. There are 4 recommendations before us there. I'll be going. Councillor Mann.
Happy to move them on block.
Thank you. Someone like to second that? Councillor Robertson, thank you. Would either of you like to speak to that?
Just glad to see that in the commentary around the festival and events policy that we're going to incorporate that rhetoric around getting more events targeted youth and young people. And I look forward to how that plays out. And I thank administration for including that within that scope of future works.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Is there any other discussion in relation to the minutes? If not, we put that to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried. Okay, we move to 14.1, Representative Reports, August 2022. There are no reports submitted under this agenda item for this meeting, unless there is a verbal one. Councillor Robertson.
Yes, I'd like to make a verbal one, please, on from the Victor Harbour High School Governing Council.
Totally.
Sorry?
Yes, by all means.
At a meeting that we held just a few days ago, a lot of concern was expressed over the opening of the Hungry Jacks on the new service station servo centre. The problem the school has is that the students are supposed to be on the school compound all day unless they have reasons to go off. And it soaks up an enormous amount of time of the staff, the teachers at the school, chasing down students who violate that policy. It used to be a problem when they had, when McDonald's was, which is like 10 or 15 minutes walk away. But now the advent of the newer service stations where you can dial up the food, you can order it online, go down there, you'll be a priority customer, go down, pick up your food and walk away. Plus these outlets, you know, targeting the students with, this is the latest deal today, you must come and try it, means that the school council has enormous concerns over the workload on their staff associated with their mandatory tasks of bringing wandering students back onto and accounting for them. And one of the things that they have tried to do when they only had McDonald's to deal with was to talk to the local vendors about would they mind not serving students that come along with in school uniform. All of the outlets did except for McDonald's. They don't know what the result of their, they haven't yet because it's so brand new. But under the, with what they're coming up against, they are really concerned about the proximity of Hungry Jacks to them. And so they probably would like to get, if it was available, some support from council to be able to try and negotiate or whatever with Hungry Jacks, if that's even a remote possibility, because, you know, they're going to be, as a result of decision of our development panel, this is one of the consequences of the schools facing.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I'm unsure what exactly council could do in terms of interacting with a private fast food operator's business, but I'm sure you and Director Pat House can have a chat about that later on. Were there any other verbal reports? Go to Hungry Jack's. If not, can someone please move that we receive and note the representative report? Councillor Kemp, Councillor Schofield seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? If not, would anyone like to speak to that? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? We move on to 14.2, Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre. There are 2 recommendations there. I'll be guided by you as to how you wish to deal with it. Councillor Mann, is that your hand? Someone to second that? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Would either of you like to speak to that? No? Would anyone like to speak to that? If not, vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We move on to 14.3, which is the Victor Harbour Horse proposal. There are 2 recommendations there. I'll be guided by you, Councillor Schofield, moving both of those. And Councillor Mann seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? No. Would anyone like to speak to that? Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, the Chester is 11 years of age and probably has another 5 years of work. My understanding is that he may be worth more than $1,000 to a person that would be interested in and would know how to look after and retrain him. So I'm just wondering why we're not going out to an expression of interest to see what the market would get. After all, we purchased him for $12,000, and yeah, if we can get you know, an expression of interest has been for $1,000, why we shouldn't be seeing if we can get a bit more than that for him.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Acting CEO Rakoczynski can answer that for you.
Thank you. Through the chair, in talking to General Manager Meg Wibley, she felt that there was a risk on selling Chester for the purposes of any kind of working, given the nature of the horse. It was determined not to be a sensible option, and that he was only suitable for being a paddock horse after having a couple of near-miss incidents in his training. I'm not best placed to make that assessment, but do trust that their trainers at the Horse Tram Authority did feel that that was the most sensible way forward, and that given his age and the incidents that have happened, it wasn't a good use of time to try and find prospective purchasers, knowing that he really is only suitable to being in a paddock.
Thank you, Acting CEO. Councillor Lidley.
Yeah, I feel fairly strongly that we should go with the assessment of those who have handled this horse, and there would be a risk on selling him and seeking out some extra dollars for the sake of finding some extra dollars, putting a horse that's been deemed not suitable for this sort of work into someone else's hands that could come back to bite us. So it's disappointing, absolutely. Not just for on the financial side of things, but for the horse and for the enjoyment of people. So hopefully he can find himself a nice paddock.
Thank you, Councillor Lidley. Is there any further discussion? If not, Councillor Schofield, would you like to close? Yes. Also, Councillor Robertson, your microphone is still on. Thank you.
I will just say that a decision like this is a very hard one to make, and I do, and I know the board support the manager on this call, and it is quite sad that we have to do this.
Thank you, councillor Schofield. With that, debate is closed and we will put recommendations 1 and 2 to the vote. All those in favour and those against, that motion is carried. We move on to item 15.1, the Mayor Report, August 2022. This report has been prepared on behalf of Mayor Jenkins. Councillor Mann moving that way. And Councillor Henderson seconding. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to that? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We move on. Elected member reports, August 2022. There is one report from Councillor Schofield. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Mann. And someone to second that, Councillor Henderson. Would either of you like to speak? Would anyone like to speak? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We move on to item 16 is matters of urgency. There being none, we move on to 17 questions on motion. Move on to questions without. Are there any? Councillor Lilley.
Yeah, I have 2 questions without notice. Question number 1, is administration able to please provide a summary of the number and overall cost, including the time of staff taken on code of conduct complaints for this term of council? My second question is administration able to outline the status of code of conduct complaints as we enter caretaker mode?
Thank you, Councillor Lilley. Acting CEO Rakoczynski.
I'd have to take that question on notice, Councillor Lilley. I'd rather get a accurate response rather than a quick one.
Thank you, Acting CEO. Councillor Lilley, a second one.
Can I just clarify that that is for both questions as far as is that administration? Question number 2 was, can administration please outline the status of code of conduct complaints as we enter caretaker mode?
That was for both. Are there any other questions without notice? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Is it possible that the council could make sure that the sign that's down at the beginning of the causeway, which is keeping dogs off the causeway, that the council could make sure that that becomes a permanent sign? It has been a huge success in keeping dogs off the causeway. It's attracted a lot of attention, and a lot of people take a lot of notice of it. It's been singularly the biggest single factor in keeping dogs off. And of course, it always possibly comes into the danger of being executed by DIT or Department of Environment, saying that there are too many signs down there. But my question is, can we adopt that sign, make sure it stays there permanently on council land?
For your question. Acting CEO Rakoczynski.
Thank you. Through the chair, I will take that one notice. Councillor Robertson, I'd just like to look at the sign itself and other signage and just compare that with policy and procedural requirements. I'll let you know.
Yeah. I have just a couple quick ones more. There's been a huge incidence again, not a huge incident, there's been a large incidence in drinking on the Screwpile Jetty. Volunteers over there have been picking up a lot of cans and bottles that are just left overnight or left in the morning. My understanding is that the whole of Granite Island and the causeway is a permanent dry zone. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Don't know. So again, take it on notice and
okay.
We'll get back to you.
That if it is a dry zone, then responsibility for policing that, is that just SAPOL or does that involve council staff as well?
Correct. SAPOL are the enforcement body.
Right. it's a problem that's there now, and as you can imagine, it's in winter. It's not a lot of people go over there, although surprising numbers do. But when it comes to the warmer weather, longer days, it will be on again. And it's not a good look for the island. For the people always imagine that the council owns the island, which we did, but we don't. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. If you don't mind turning your microphone off as well. Are there any other questions without notice? If not, we'll move on to motions on notice. Out notice? If not, we'll move on to 21, which is our confidential items. The first one is 21.1 confidential Granite Island Visitor Experience Master Plan feedback. The first recommendation is that we go into confidence under section 93D of the Act. Is someone happy to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Mann, and seconding Councillor Henderson. Would either of you like to speak to that? Would anyone like to speak to that? If not, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you very much to those in the gallery still. Wish you good night.